Han Sen was shocked. He thought they might all be storming over to mob him, but they had actually all come to him for a blessing. That realization made him feel much safer. To be honest, performing blessings can harm my body and reduce my lifespan. After blessing someone, it takes me half a year to recover. My lifespan is also cut down by 100 years. If I didn't need the xenogeneic genes, I wouldn't have accepted Bar's offer. So, if you offer me 2,000, 4,000, or even 5,000 now, I won't do it. I'm sorry if I have to disappoint you like this, Han Sen said, feeling bad about the words even as they came out of his mouth. Although using the Blood Pulse Sutra consumed a lot of energy, it wasn't half as bad as Han Sen made it sound. He only needed a day or two of rest. And in regards to shortening his lifespan, that was pure nonsense. Han Sen said this because he didn't wish to bless any old Tom, Dick, and Harry that came by. And he needed to maintain his reputation. He wouldn't be considered as prestigious and special if he went around blessing everyone. Han Sen didn't think he was lying, though. They wouldn't believe that a deified could be produced for practically no cost at all. What Han Sen said seemed to make sense. Reducing a lifespan by 100 years for a deified was still a low price to pay. Of course, it wouldn't harm their lifespans. For them, it was okay. But what made them so depressed was the fact that Han Sen wasn't going to accept King's xenogeneic genes in order to bless others. Now, every race regretted it. If they had known what would happen when Han Sen first announced a blessing for the price of 2,000 xenogeneic genes, they'd have bought it without a shadow of a doubt. The situation now sucked. Even if they paid him triple the original price, he wouldn't bless them. We allowed the destroyed to snap up a bargain. Many of the higher races felt incredibly sad. They were very jealous of the destroyed's bar. Mr. Godfather, I'm willing to use my body. I will be a maid or a slave, or anything you wish of me to become. I'm begging you to be nice enough to bless me just once. A foxwoman winked at Han Sen. Teacher Han, this is the sky treasure lotus, known as the 5 treasure. Eating 1 lotus seed can increase your lifespan by 10 years. There are 23 here. I'm hoping you will be willing to bless our master just once. Teacher Han. Han Sen had said he was no longer accepting xenogeneic genes, so the smarter people started to offer all sorts of different benefits and gifts in the hope it would convince Han Sen to bless them. My body hasn't yet healed. I cannot bless you. It is useless, even if I make promises. You must wait until my body is healed first. Continuing to talk to them was pointless. No matter how many times Han Sen tried to explain things, he couldn't get rid of them, so he decided to exit the core area. Back in the White Whale, Han Sen became dollar again. Then he returned to the core area. With Bar's 2,000 core xenogeneic genes, he was very close to getting his 4 areas to the 9th tier. Han Sen planned to kill a few xenogeneics by himself, and while doing so, he might as well practice his teleportation abilities and Big Destroyed. Since he used Dollar's identity to enter the core area, not many people cared to bother him. That didn't mean that no one came after him, however. Han Sen found the bronze furnace, and after they flew for only a few minutes, 2 women of the sky came racing toward him. One of them was Li Kier. He already knew her. The other woman had a white veil obscuring her face. Han Sen couldn't determine what she looked like, but he knew she was one of the sky. Brother Dollar, long time no see, Li Kier said calmly, forcing her demeanor to be casual. She and the other woman had been waiting there all that time for Han Sen to show up again in his dollar persona. But it had been a long time since Han Sen used that persona, and so they had been waiting for a very long time. Fortunately, they were not impatient people. They had remained by Dollar's exit point until he reappeared. Lady Kier, who is this? Han Sen asked, looking at Third Sister. He thought that the woman was quite strange. She didn't seem to be looking at a person. It was more like she was examining a product, and it made Han Sen feel rather uncomfortable. This is Third Sister. Her name is Exquisite. After Li Kier introduced the other woman, she said, Brother Dollar, if you don't have anything else to do, how about we hunt xenogeneics together? Han Sen hesitated. He didn't want to travel with others. He really just wanted to quietly hunt xenogeneics and practice his geno arts for a while. But he did have a history with Li Kier, and so he would have felt bad if he turned down her request. Li Kier taught me how to teleport, and she knows I have Big Destroyed. I suppose I can practice in front of her, Han Sen thought. He nodded to the women. Sure. I'm not familiar with this area. Do you know where I can find King-class energenics? I know of a place with many King-class energenics. Allow me to take you there, Li Qiu said with a laugh. Han Sen went silent for a moment, then said, if we cooperate, there is something we should discuss first. We should talk about how we will separate the loot. How about an even split? Li Qiu suggested. Yeah, I think that is great. I will take 50%, and you two split the other 50. Are you guys okay with that? Han Sen said. Li Qiu was surprised. When she suggested an even split, she meant that they should divide the loot 3 ways, with everyone getting an equal share. Her even split was different from his even split. Exquisite said coldly, that division of shares is unfair. Whoever works the most should earn the most. We are cooperating, but we don't need to divide up the prizes. There are many xenogenics. Whoever kills a beast can loot it. Sharing doesn't matter. I like the way you think.
Han Sen nodded.
Splitting things up that way would be best. With Li Qiu leading the way, the 3 of them flew into space. Han Sen was able to talk easily to Li Qiu, but Exquisite had a very loner-type personality. She wasn't very fond of talking, and she didn't say a word to Han Sen. The way she looked at Han Sen made him uncomfortable, too. She was like a robot without any emotions. Exquisite was going to use this xenogenic hunting opportunity to get a first-hand look at the power Han Sen wielded. She wanted to see more of his personality, too. She hadn't expected that Han Sen would suggest dividing up the loot in such a way. Rather than saying anything, Exquisite planned to teach Han Sen a lesson. She was going to test Han Sen's mettle and steal all of his kills. I want to see who you really are. Exquisite touched her eyes. They had healed now, but she was still scared after what happened. The bronze furnace was flying next to Han's senator when they reached a certain area. It stopped in its tracks and started to cry to Han Sen. What is it? Han Sen asked, frowning and looking at the bronze furnace. Danger, the bronze furnace said by writing words in fire and smoke. The bronze furnace refused to go forward, so Han Sen had no choice but to leave it behind. He went on ahead with Li Qiu and Exquisite. The bronze furnace continued to spit out fire behind Han Sen, creating a sentence that read, "Don't go. There is danger." Han Sen asked the bronze furnace what the danger was, but it didn't elaborate. All it did was continue to warn Han Sen of some danger, and that he should stay away from there. You wait for me here. Han Sen didn't think there was any reason that he should be afraid. There were few creatures in the core area that could threaten him these days. The 3 of them kept flying. The bronze furnace was too reluctant to follow them. After a short while of flight, the 3 of them saw a xenogeniac soaring through space. As soon as they noticed the xenogeniac, the creature noticed them, too. It roared and flew over to them. The xenogeniac growled like a crocodile, but it looked to have been built out of red metal. Bat-like metal wings spread from the creature's back, and it flew very quickly. Lights gleamed across the edges of its metallic body as it cast an area. Metal chains appeared within that area, shooting out and binding anything that moved. Han Sen and the others were tied down by those metal chains. Han Sen struggled and noticed that the metal chains were so strong. They were too hard for even him to break them. Han Sen summoned his strength, but suddenly there was a flash. The creature was cut in half, and the chains that bound them vanished. "Pardon me," Exquisite said coldly. Then, she flew over to the King Xenogeniac and dug out its Xenogeniac gene. "Lady Exquisite is quite strong," Han Sen complimented. The hit earlier was nothing short of perfection. It happened so fast that Han Sen hadn't even seen what skill she unleashed to destroy that Xenogeniac. Her skills were strong, there was no doubt of that. But it made Han Sen curious. It had been a long time since he'd stayed in Sky Palace, but he had never heard of Li Qiu or Exquisite in the time he spent there. With their powers, there was no way he could have avoided hearing stories about them. Exquisite, with an absence of emotion, said, "That was an ordinary space-cutting skill." Han Sen laughed and said nothing. Space geno arts were difficult to practice. Exquisite made it sound as if the skill was nothing extraordinary, but Han Sen knew she was just acting. "We've just arrived, and already we've encountered a King Xenogeniac. We are lucky. We should be able to earn a lot from this trip," Li Qiu said. Are the xenogeneics around here the same as that one? Han Sen asked. Yes. These xenogeneics are called chain demon crocodiles. They rule this area. There are many marquises and dukes here. Kings and half-deifieds, also. There is a legendary crocodile god here, as well, but we have never seen it, Likir answered.
Han Sen nodded.
Then, the three of them proceeded. There were many chain demon crocodiles in the nearby asteroids. Crocodiles began to emerge from the asteroid belts, and while Han Sen examined the creatures, Exquisite was already moving. Exquisite immediately flew over to the chain demon crocodiles, her white clothes trailing behind her. There were tens of thousands of them, but most of them were low-level. Han Sen didn't see a single king-class crocodile in their midst. Just as Exquisite was about to reach the hordes of demon crocodiles, her body suddenly vanished from sight. The Geno art used by Exquisite was familiar to Han's senator she had teleported. But Exquisite's proficiency with teleportation abilities had already reached space teleportation. She was able to cross great distances with the skill. Han Sen was unable to see her amidst the crocodile group. In the blink of an eye, Han Sen heard a squeal. Then, Exquisite's body appeared before them again. In her hand, she held a xenogeneic gene that was shaped like a metal cogwheel. It was the same xenogeneic gene that could be found in the king-class crocodiles. Let's go. There was only one king there. Killing these lower-level ones is pointless, Exquisite said. Then, she flew away. Han Sen watched Exquisite leave. He thought of something, and a smile crossed his face. Then he followed. Han Sen didn't know if Exquisite was deliberately stealing the king's xenogeneics, but if this was to continue, Exquisite was going to kill all the kings. If that happened, this trip would have been a waste of time. The sky can be so scary. I've never heard of Exquisite before, but she is so strong. Han Sen then got to thinking about how he might steal the demon crocodiles from beneath her nose. With Han Sen's speed, any crocodiles below king class had no hope of chasing after them. They would be left in the dust. The giant planet up ahead has loads of demon crocodiles. Should we go there? Likir pointed at the planet as she spoke. Sure.
Han Sen nodded.
If there were lots of crocodile kings, then he wouldn't have to fight against Exquisite for the kills. This planet is like a white dwarf. Its temperature and gravity are scary, so be careful, Likir warned them. Han Sen looked at the dark red planet and was shocked. Compared to ordinary stars, white dwarfs were very small. But this white dwarf up ahead was very large. It looked like it would take forever for them to fly to it, unless they used space teleportation. Luckily, though, the core area's space wasn't like ordinary space. There wasn't a lot of space between the planets like there was in the Alliance. They entered the orbit of their destination, and Han Sen felt the heat immediately start to burn his body. A powerful force of gravity was pulling him down. This gravity is very strong. Han Sen was shocked. Even with his level of power, he could still feel the effects of that gravity. The mass of that planet was unimaginable. While it was an annoyance, Han Sen could still fly with that amount of gravity. As he dropped toward the planet, he felt like the powerful forces acting on him were slowing down everything around him. Even break space teleportation was really slow now. Quickly, Han Sen discovered two chain demon crocodiles lying on the planet's surface. This made Han Sen very happy, because the two chain demon crocodiles were kings. They had dark red metal armor that looked very intimidating. Are the demon crocodiles on this planet king class? Han Sen thought it was possible. The planet's temperature and gravity were scary. After all, ordinary demon crocodiles probably couldn't survive such conditions. If Duke demon crocodiles went to the surface, they probably wouldn't even be able to move there. The scary gravity would probably crush them, not to mention the insane temperatures that would likely melt their bodies. Two demon crocodiles appeared at the same time. Han Sen teleported over to the one that was farther from him. He gave the closer one to Exquisite, as he didn't want to steal the kill from her. Gravity was strong there. Even teleportation happened slowly beneath that level of pressure. When Han Sen teleported near the demon crocodile, Exquisite had already killed the creature. Exquisite looked at Han Sen and then teleported again. She appeared in front of Han Sen, cutting the other demon crocodile in half as well. These crocodiles were just second or third tier kings. but they lived in an environment with strong gravity. Their bodies were incredibly dense and hard. It was scary to see Exquisite kill one in a mere second, but Han Sen was no longer focused on Exquisite's skills. If they had been engaging in a simple competition before, things had now gone beyond that. This was straight-up thievery. "Lady Exquisite, do you have to be in such a rush?" Han Sen said, looking at her. "If I can earn more by putting in more work, why wouldn't I do my best?" Exquisite asked coolly. There was no emotion in her voice. She spoke as if this was something that she did every day. "You are right. People should do all they can." Han Sen looked at Exquisite and nodded. Likir hastily tried to repair the atmosphere of the group, and so she said, "Please do not mind her behavior, Dollar. Third sister is always like this. She doesn't hate you." Han Sen laughed and said, "Lady Exquisite is right. Trying your best is the right thing to do. I need to learn from her." The atmosphere was awkward, to say the least. Likir didn't know what to say now. The three of them continued to travel forward. The planet was very large. They had to slog forward under the weight of its gravity. After flying for an hour, they spotted another demon crocodile. As soon as the creature came into view, Han Sen and Exquisite were gone. Exquisite wanted to make sure that she didn't let Han Sen kill a single demon crocodile. She was going to get everyone. Likir felt glum. She didn't want to test Han Sen this way, but if this was how Exquisite wanted to do things, she had no choice but to accept it. After all, she was low-ranking in the very high. She had no authority over third sister Exquisite. If this keeps going, Dollar will get angry, Likir thought to herself. She didn't know what she could do to make their relationship better. While she was thinking, Likir saw the demon crocodile's skull crumble. In a split second, its metallic head was reduced to sand. Likir was surprised. The creature hadn't died by Exquisite's space-cutting skill. That was the Geno art called Big Destroyed. Exquisite knew many Geno arts, but not even she knew Big Destroyed. The Geno art couldn't be learned unless someone had the body of a Destroyed. Although there were some members of the very high that had been fortunate enough to study Big Destroyed, the numbers of such people were few, and they had a great deal of difficulty becoming proficient with the skill. Exquisite had never bothered with it. Likir took a closer look. It wasn't Exquisite that had broken the crocodile's head. It was Han Senator. She was surprised, and she murmured to herself, "He really did learn Big Destroyed." When Likir had seen Han Sen receive Big Destroyed in trade, she had thought Han Sen was being an idiot. She believed it would be impossible for him to learn it. However, in such a short amount of time, Han Sen had become proficient with the skill, and on top of that, he could use it in battle now. It was scarcely believable. Is this guy that talented? Likir looked at Han Sen with shock. Before, Han Sen had easily learned God's Wonder. When he did, Likir was very surprised. Now, he was showing off Big Destroyed. The most unbelievable thing about it all was that Han Sen had managed to kill the demon crocodile before Exquisite could. Likir couldn't believe it. Likir didn't think there was any way that Dollar's teleportation ability could be superior to Exquisite's. Dollar had only just learned God's Wonder, after all. How can he be faster than third sister? Likir looked at Exquisite. Exquisite was staring at Han Sen. Exquisite's face was expressionless, but she was shocked on the inside. She was thinking as hard as she could, trying to figure out how Han Sen was faster than her. It should have been impossible. "Lady Exquisite, I'm sorry." Han Sen laughed and dug out the demon crocodile's xenogenic gene. "You got it with your power. There is no need to apologize," Exquisite responded in a level tone. Then, she resumed her flight. Exquisite thought she must have underestimated Dollar. Because of that, she must not have tried her best. This is good. It is great that I can force him to reveal his true power. But Exquisite formulated a plan to keep Han Sen from securing any other kills after this. "Dollar, you really managed to learn Big Destroyed?" Likir flew over to Han Sen and tried to chat with him. "I got lucky. I've only just learned it," Han Sen said. "Are all humans so talented? Why have I never heard of this race before?" Likir and Han Sen started to chat. Han Sen and Likir were talking, but Han Sen kept his eyes peeled for crocodiles. Likir was a little distracting, and Exquisite wasn't talking. All of her focus was placed on her surroundings. She was going to make sure she killed any creatures that appeared before Dollar could get to them. Suddenly, a demon crocodile appeared in front of Exquisite. Exquisite used God's Wander to teleport over to it. But when she appeared in front of that demon crocodile, the crocodile's head had already been crushed. Han Sen was standing right next to her, chuckling. Likir and Exquisite were both frozen. When this happened the first time, they could convince themselves that it had been a fluke or a mistake. This time, however, they couldn't deny that Exquisite had simply lost. This time, Exquisite had tried her best to reach the demon crocodile first, but she had lost to Dollar again. And on top of that, he'd been in the middle of a conversation with Likir. Exquisite let her eyes linger on Han Sen for some time. Then, she looked back at Likir and asked, "Is he using God's Wander?" Exquisite could tell that Han Sen was using God's Wander, but there was no way Han Sen's God's Wander was better than hers. Her experience with God's Wander should have been far greater than Han Sen's. She shouldn't have lost to him. That must be God's Wander, right? Likir wasn't sure anymore either. She knew that if Dollar was using God's Wander, he couldn't be any faster than Exquisite. But somehow he was. Next time, take a closer look and observe. See if he is truly using God's Wander, Exquisite instructed. The three of them kept on traveling. When they saw another demon crocodile, Exquisite focused her mind beyond what she thought was possible. But even so, she was still slower than Han Sen. This time, Likir and Exquisite were able to confirm that Han Sen was indeed using God's Wander. But he should have been no better than a beginner with God's Wander. He should have been far slower than Exquisite. But this beginner level of God's Wander was faster than Exquisite's advanced techniques. Exquisite couldn't believe this truth, but as they continued to move forward, she was no longer able to collect any more spoils from the demon crocodiles. The next 7 demon crocodiles were stolen by Han Sen. Likir and Exquisite were feeling something beyond shock. As they watched Dollar make kill after kill, they were growing numb. They couldn't wrap their heads around how Dollar was doing this. He had used the Very High's teleportation ability to beat a member of the Very High. Even Exquisite, whose face was forever cold and expressionless, looked shocked. In fact, when they encountered the last 2 crocodiles, Exquisite had given up trying to steal the kills from Han Senator. She resorted to paying attention to how Han Sen moved. She wanted to learn how he moved faster than her. To her surprise, Exquisite confirmed that Han Sen's God's Wander really was a beginner variant. It should have been slower than hers, yet for some reason, it didn't look slow. The fact that he seemed to be using the skill in an ordinary manner made Exquisite feel rather strange. A while later, Exquisite finally unearthed the truth. This planet's gravity doesn't seem to affect him. Han Sen's teleportation ability wasn't actually faster than hers, but it was unhindered by the gravity that hampered her. Han Sen used the ability at the same speed that he would anywhere else in the universe. Exquisite's theory was correct. Han Sen used the Dongxian area to stop the universal cogwheels of gravity. The planet's gravity wheel no longer affected him, but Exquisite was still under its thumb. That resulted in her becoming slower than him. The Dongxian Sutra was similar to the Very High Sense, but they had been developed in different directions. As a result, the Very High Sense lacked this ability. Power that can ignore the effects of gravity? That is very interesting. Exquisite nodded. There were Geno arts like that in the Very High, but she hadn't chosen to practice them. So, she wasn't surprised. It looks like this place isn't giving him a reason to display his true power. I need to wait until the crocodile god shows up. Exquisite hadn't expected this to be an ideal place for Han Sen to demonstrate his true power. Anyway, she hadn't come here to watch Han Sen slay some demon crocodiles. She wanted him to square off against the crocodile god. King-class xenogeneics weren't easy to find, and the 3 of them only located a dozen demon crocodiles. Because of the planet's gravity and scary temperature, King-class fighters that couldn't teleport would be in a lot of danger if they came there to fight chain demon crocodiles. And if it had been an easier place to hunt, there wouldn't have been many chain demon crocodiles for Han Sen to slay. After Han Sen killed 7 demon crocodiles, another half-day of travel failed to bring them any more xenogeneics. It looks like the demon crocodiles are getting wiped out by our efforts. Are there any other places with kings? Han Sen asked, still wanting more. Since we're already here, let's walk around the planet just in case we've overlooked something, Exquisite said. Han Sen readily agreed to that. It was rare to find king xenogeneics, so he needed to ensure he killed all the creatures they were able to find. The three of them continued to scour the planet, and after a short while of walking, they discovered another demon crocodile. This time, however, Han Sen didn't immediately strike. After all, Li Qier and Exquisite had brought him there. He would feel bad if he took every single kill. So, he decided to leave one for them to take out. Exquisite seemed to look on Han Sen's generosity with contempt. When Li Qier noticed Han Sen not moving, however, she knew exactly what he was thinking. She teleported forward and slew the chained demon crocodile. Li Qier was weaker than Exquisite, but killing fourth-tier chained demon crocodiles was a trivial task. After killing the crocodile, they saw some movement out in front of them. It looked like a bubble of lava rising to the surface of the planet, as if something was about to emerge from down below. More demon crocodiles? Han Sen asked, glancing in that direction. Then, he saw a demon crocodile appear. But this demon crocodile looked different from the other demon crocodiles. It looked similar to the others, but this demon crocodile seemed smaller than usual. It was the size of an ordinary crocodile, and it didn't have any wings. Ordinary demon crocodiles had red, metallic bodies. This one, however, was pitch black. If its body hadn't been releasing a strange glow of some sort, it would have looked just like a normal crocodile at a passing glance. Han Sen observed the demon crocodile with narrowed eyes, and a wave of tension rolled through his body. He only felt this way when he was in danger. As Han Sen observed the small demon crocodile, he remembered the behavior of the bronze furnace. He was able to guess what this creature was. I thought it was the gravity and heat that frightened the bronze furnace. I guess there really is a deified xenogeneic here, huh? Han Sen wasn't terribly shocked about this. On the contrary, he was rather happy. Another chance to kill a deified xenogeneic was the best thing he could hope for. Han Sen was close to becoming deified himself, so he needed to collect as many deified xenogeneic genes as he could. If he became deified, he wouldn't be able to enter the core area. So he had to kill as many core deifieds as possible while he still could. Careful. This looks like a deified demon crocodile, Li Qier warned them. Exquisite didn't say anything in response. She had detected the crocodile god's presence a long time ago. The very high sense was better than the Dongxian Sutra in this regard. The Dongxian Sutra could only sense what was in the area. The very high sense was about the sky and practitioner becoming one. When Exquisite stood on the planet, she could see everything on that planet clearly. She didn't have to use an area to discover what was around her, and she was only using the very high sense at a very low level. If she reached the top level possible, she would be able to see and detect anything across the whole universe. Of course, that was just a theory on what a perfect version of the very high sense could do. No one in the very high had ever become that proficient with it. The very high sense focused on one's senses. The sense-detecting ability was greater than the Dongxian Sutras, but its ability of control was weaker than the Dongxian Sutra. They both had their pros and cons. Han Sen observed the crocodile god. The crocodile's eyes looked like the eyes of a lion as it stared at them. It might have just been the shape of the crocodile's face, but the creature seemed to be staring at Han Sen and his companions with scorn. It also looked as if it didn't care for their presence. That was especially true of its very small eyes. Its gaze was snobby and patronizing. As Han Sen was about to move, the crocodile god released a black light. That light was like a black hole that encompassed the entire planet. Han Sen's body felt as if it was sinking. There was a loud noise, and he fell. He hit the planet's surface with his limbs outstretched. Han Sen wasn't the only one who had slammed into the ground in an undignified manner. Li Qier and Exquisite fell, too. They crumpled to the ground in very awkward postures. They no longer looked like elegant women. Han Sen cast all his powers to try and stand up, but it felt as if the strength of his abilities was being sucked away by a strong magnet. He was unable to get back to his feet. He couldn't even lift his head off the ground. Li Qier and Exquisite were in a similar situation. They were unable to move. The three of them were stretched spread eagle on the ground, and they all watched the small crocodile come over to them. Han Sen gnashed his teeth as he tried to get up. He used all of his power to do so, and that included opening his 9th-tier Dongxian area. Yet despite that, his body was still pinned to the ground. It didn't look as if he would be leaving anytime soon. It wasn't only Han Sen suffering this. Li Qier and Exquisite were desperately trying to get free, as well. Their faces looked more than grim. They weren't acting this time. This situation was beyond their control. There were many accidents in life, and now, Li Qier and Exquisite had run into one. It was a very bad one, at that. They had seen the crocodile god before, and it wasn't too long ago. They knew how strong the crocodile god could be, but they were still confident they had a sufficient amount of power to get by if they fought the creature. But while men propose, gods tend to dispose. And the very high were not gods. It was impossible to see and know everything. They hadn't realized that this deified crocodile god had such strength. Deified beings had 5 stages of growth: primitive, transmutation, larva, butterfly, and true god. Ordinary deifieds in the core area were considered primitive. The core area's deified xenogeneics were forever stuck in the bracket of primitive deifieds. It was thought that they were limited, unable to grow beyond that level. Even though the strong ones like Gold Armor General were on the upper edge of the primitive bracket, they were still worse than an average deified being. When they saw the crocodile god, they thought it was on par with the Gold Armor General. It had a strong body that was on the upper borders of the primitive level. Its area was composed of chains that were used to restrict enemies. But that was all there was to it. Exquisite and Li Qier weren't afraid of the creature. God's Wander could break space and let them escape the crocodile god's chains. The last time they were here, this was how they had gotten free. But this time, something unexpected had happened. The crocodile god had changed. It must have somehow managed to level up. But that should have been an impossible task for deifieds in the core area. They didn't know if the crocodile god was of the transmutation rank or larva rank. What was happening here was completely outside of their experience and education, and the crocodile god's power exceeded what they were able to sense and understand. The scariest thing about all of this, though, was that after the crocodile god leveled up, wild changes had occurred within the creature's substance chains. Its scary, gravity-like substance chains could affect space. Space was cracking and breaking under the creature's power, which also kept them from escaping. Li Qier and Exquisite used all the Geno arts they could think of to try to break free. They used more than Han Sen, even. But under the gravitic power of the crocodile god, none of their abilities seemed to work. One power could crush 10 things, but the crocodile god's gravity was strong enough to crush everything. At the very least, it prohibited Li Qier and Exquisite from breaking free. Third sister, what do we do? Li Qier asked Exquisite in a trembling voice. Exquisite was able to keep calm. She watched the crocodile god slowly coming toward them, and she said firmly, "Although I don't know what has happened, the core area has allowed the crocodile god to level up. I don't think it has reached any further than transmutation, though. The substance chains have made their own substance rules, and those rules are not yet complete. We have our very high spell, and if we exhaust all of our power, we might be able to escape this." Upon hearing Exquisite say all this, Li Qier felt much safer. But she asked, "What about Dollar?" Han Sen was quite far away from them. Under that scary force of gravity, they were unable to move. When they used their powers, they would only be able to escape the crocodile god's trap in a straight line. God's Wander could probably allow them to escape, but they doubted they would be able to save Han Sen. "We will try to save him, but if we can't, then you must select another silkworm," Exquisite said quietly. It was like Han Sen's life was nothing in her eyes. He was like a piece of paper. If it was ripped, it was no big deal. The very high had no emotions. They weren't born that way, but the more they practiced the very high sense, the less they cared about the people around them. Love didn't need to be shown. For the very high, love didn't mean anything. On top of that, Dollar was just a silkworm. The silkworms they selected were no more important to them than test subjects or lab rats. The very high would foster their silkworms, watching them grow and develop until they became deified. Then the very high would continue to raise their silkworms through the ranks of primitive, transmutation, larva, butterfly, and true god. The very high would learn through this process, experiencing what it was like to become a god. With that experience under their belts, they would have a good base to become true gods. When the very high began to follow their own path to power, the process would be much safer and smoother. Their power grew, and they never needed to experience the misfortune of a mistake. Creatures in that universe took pride in being selected by the very high. They thought they were actually taking advantage of the very high, as they would learn many geno-arts and be given many other resources. Silkworms were treated well. The very high gave out so much that it might have looked like they didn't want anything in exchange. It was unknown how many of the higher races had been selected by the very high and developed under the protective wing of that most powerful race. So, the very high didn't fight against the other races in order to claim anything. But the reputation of the very high was above even that of the extreme king. They were a race admired by the entire universe. Even the extreme king's princes and princesses would be proud to be selected by the very high for nurturing. Warriors from ordinary and lesser higher races would be even more pleased to be chosen. If someone from a lower race was selected by a very high, that meant they would be made a primitive deified, at the very least. Their entire race could be considered a higher race then. Although many geniuses could guess that the very high did this for their own betterment, so what? Many people were willing to sacrifice a great deal for the chance of becoming deified. Those who had watched Han Sen's blessings had gone mad with the desire to become deified. Plus, Han Sen's blessing only pushed them to the primitive deified territory. The very high, on the other hand, could take them further. Many became butterflies under the nurturing hands of their very high masters. They didn't mind making sacrifices for this opportunity, but the very high never asked for anything. In fact, being a lab rat for the very high wasn't all that bad. You received many benefits. If Li Qier had explained all of this to Han Sen, he might have agreed. But Li Qier had wanted to claim Han Sen's heart before she received his body. All her attempts thus far had gone terribly, though. As the crocodile god came nearer, Exquisite raised her voice to say, "Get ready to leave before it is too late." As she spoke, a light emerged from Exquisite's body. Strange symbols appeared across her skin. It was like many musical notes were now glowing across her body. This was the very high's very high spell. Very high elites placed the spell across their bodies. When they used the ability, they'd be gifted the power of a deified for a short time. They only needed one chance to make use of God's wander and depart to a place that was many systems away. Boom! That mysterious very high spell broke those new rules of gravity, and Exquisite's body flashed far away into space until she was gone from sight. Han Sen was shocked. Exquisite's power exploded with the strength of a deified. He had no idea how she had accomplished something like that. How do I escape this? Han Sen didn't have time to contemplate how Exquisite might have unleashed the amount of power that she had. His escape took precedence. But the strength of this crocodile god was beyond his imagination. He didn't think he had the power to fight against something that's scary. Pang! Han Sen hadn't decided on how he should escape when he heard another loud noise. Exquisite had just used space teleportation to break free, but she fell out of it and landed back on the planet. She lay where she was, coughing up blood. Her expression didn't look remote and untouchable now. She looked like she was in trouble. Han Sen was stunned. Exquisite already used space teleportation. Why is she back? This is so scary. Third sister, Li Qier said hesitantly. It shook her to see Exquisite like that. She asked, "Third sister, what happened?" Exquisite was unable to speak. Blood was still gushing out of her mouth. She had used the very high spell to break the rules of gravity and escape. She traveled away from the planet for a time, but when the very high spell was exhausted, the terrifying power of the creature yanked her back down. It was like a rubber band. The further away she got, the harder her descent was. Now, most of her organs had ruptured. This wouldn't kill her, but with the pressure of the planet's gravity, the pain was excruciating. If she had met an ordinary primitive deified, she could have dealt with all of this. Exquisite was a 9th-tier king with the very high's geno-arts, after all. But against that crocodile god, without the very high spell, it was doubtful many of the very high could survive. The level gap was way too big. After seeing the condition that Exquisite was now in, Li Qier knew that it was lucky that she had hesitated to use her very high spell. She merely looked at Exquisite, hoping the other woman's recovery would be swift. At that moment, the crocodile god was only 10 meters away from them. Its small crocodile eyes peered at them like it was toying with them. The crocodile god looked over them for a while. Its attention was mostly on Exquisite, though, and it climbed over to her slowly. Han Sen frowned. He didn't know if he could escape this. He wasn't even thinking about saving Exquisite, who had been unkind to him. But Li Qier had taught him space teleportation. It didn't seem appropriate to sit back and watch her die. Right now, the crocodile god was focused on Exquisite. He could take Li Qier away. As Han Sen hesitated, the crocodile god slapped the ground, and the ground shook. The three of them were bounced away. Exquisite was closest to the crocodile god, and so she flew the highest. The crocodile god swung its tail. It smacked Exquisite and sent her flying. Han Sen fell onto the ground hard. He watched Exquisite fly through the air. The blow hadn't been as devastating as he thought it would be. When she landed, Han Sen watched her manage to get up. Han Sen wasn't sure what to do, and the crocodile's tail struck another 2 times. It sent Han Sen and Li Qier flying as well. It was like baseball, one tail swing per person as it hurled them through the air. The crocodile god's tail was very powerful, but the creature was controlling its power very carefully. Han Sen didn't feel as if much strength had been used to strike his body. It was more like he was just being tossed away. He landed next to Exquisite. Li Qier hit the ground beside them, as well. The strangest thing was, this place looked similar to the rest of the planet. But the force of gravity on them had now been relieved. It wasn't just the crocodile god's rules of gravity that had been lifted, either. The planet's weighty, natural gravity was gone, too. Han Sen and Li Qier stood up. They ambled around until they noticed the ground had turned from dark red to black. There was a hole nearby. Could this be the crocodile god's cave? Why did it send us here? Is it going to save us for a snack? Han Sen wondered to himself. Third sister, are you okay? Li Qier was holding the injured Exquisite. Exquisite shook her head. It's only my organs that have been damaged. I am fine. Don't use space teleportation just yet. The crocodile god's area of gravity is too strong. Even if we teleport away, its powers are bound to pull us back down. Han Sen agreed with that prediction, so he didn't think about teleporting away to make an escape. His teleportation abilities were still new, too. He couldn't do space teleportation yet. If Exquisite couldn't escape, then he couldn't escape. The crocodile god swung its tail threateningly from side to side, but Han Sen wasn't too afraid of it. If the crocodile god wanted to kill them, it would have done so earlier. There was no need for it to send them over here. Perhaps the crocodile god wanted to play a game of cat and mouse, but whatever the case ended up being, it didn't seem as if their deaths were on the tablet just yet. As Han Sen tried to guess what the crocodile god wanted to do, he suddenly heard the sound of something crawling coming from the cave. He spun around in surprise, and he thought to himself, is there more than one crocodile god? Exquisite and Li Qier heard the sound, as well. They turned to face the entrance of the cave. They quickly saw another crocodile emerge from the pit. This crocodile was even smaller, no more than 1 foot long. Its body was pitch black, and its scales were very tight. They shone with a metallic luster. Due to the fact it was so small, it didn't look very menacing. It actually looked rather cute. It was like a metal doll, but its small eyes looked at them with scorn in exactly the same way that the crocodile god had. The eyes were a sharp contrast with the creature's cute body. Is this the crocodile god's child? Han Sen looked at the small crocodile with shock. It wasn't just small, it also looked rather young. It looked like a baby. Exquisite and Li Qier looked very surprised. To their knowledge, the core area xenogeneics came from the core hall. Few core xenogeneics ever gave birth, but this crocodile god had produced an heir right here. It was such a rare thing to witness in the core area. Amidst their confusion, the small crocodile god found them. Excitement washed over the creature's face in an almost human expression. Boom! The small crocodile god was so excited that a black light began to shine from its body. Han Sen and the others were covered in the light, and then, the three of them dropped to the ground again. They were pinned down, their faces glued to the dirt. How could it be born deified? Exquisite and Likir gasped, almost losing their voices. They looked at the little creature in disbelief. In the universe outside the core area, the heirs of deifieds were known for having better-than-average genes. They had incredible potential, but when they were born, they weren't that different from ordinary people or creatures. They would still need to level up. It was like the deified jade toad that lived in Narrow Moon. Its small offspring started at the lowest class of xenogeneic, and they would have to level up over the years. Most of them would never reach deified rank, though, and what rank they reached would be largely dependent on what resources they had available. Of course, there were some creatures that were born deified. There weren't many of those, though. The most famous of those came from the second top race, the ancient gods. Those beings were born deified. They were born as primitive deifieds, and they had to work their way up from there. Many were able to become butterflies, with others managing to reach the prestigious level of true god. When Han Sen had seen the ancient water god, that deified was a true god. The ancient water god origin was still in Han Sen's possession, so if there was ever a new ancient water god, it would be a primitive deified. But such cases were very rarely seen in the Geno universe. And on top of that, this was the core area. It was hard to make babies there, and the odds of having a child be born deified were astronomically low. Normally, xenogeneics that were born deified could grow a lot if they gained enough resources. They could certainly become a butterfly and possibly reach the rank of true god. Exquisite and Likir observed the smaller crocodile god with wide eyes. Born deifieds were highly coveted as silkworms. They were the best of the best. If they were already deified, there would be no need for them to grow. Plus, they would have exceptional talent. They could certainly reach the rank of butterfly, and with some luck, they could become true gods. Likir's primary goal was to gain a butterfly. She wanted a butterfly silkworm. The ancient gods had no interest in becoming silkworms of the very high. Otherwise, all of the very high would have fought for ancient gods to be their silkworms. Across history, very few of the ancient gods had become silkworms for the very high. The total number could be counted on one hand. That small crocodile god was definitely as strong as an ancient god. Exquisite, and Likir really wanted it. But they knew that this wasn't the time to try to claim a silkworm. Their lives were in its scaled hands. The small crocodile god happily trotted over before Han Sen and the others. It looked at the three of them with curiosity, but its eyes were so small. No matter how Han Sen chose to inspect them, they were tiny. Han Sen now understood that he had held a false impression of the crocodile god. It wasn't looking at them with disdain. The creature's eyes just grew like that. The big crocodile god came crawling over, calling to the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god's black light faded. Han Sen and the other two felt the pressure of gravity release them. They stood up. They didn't know what the crocodile gods were thinking, but one thing was for sure. The crocodile gods had no intention of killing them. Exquisite and Likir were good at sensing things. They could feel that the crocodile gods harbored no murderous intent toward them. The big crocodile god headed toward the hole. The small crocodile god climbed atop its back. It looked back and made a noise at Han Sen and the others. Exquisite and Likir were good at sensing things, so they knew immediately what it meant. Han Sen's sensing abilities were inferior, but even he could guess that the crocodile god wanted them to follow it. The three of them looked at each other, then entered the hole. Likir and Exquisite couldn't escape, and Han Sen was keen on knowing what the crocodiles were up to. Han Sen could see that the hole wasn't very big, and thus, he didn't think that it was very deep. When he entered, he swiftly realized that he was wrong. The bottomless hole seemed to go straight to the core of the planet. The three of them followed the two crocodiles, plunging into the gaping hole. They didn't know how far they had descended, but they found themselves near the planet's core, looking out on a sea of lava. In truth, the red liquid was thicker and darker than lava. It was like the hydrogen that burned in the sun. This must be the core of this planet. The crocodile god must live here. Exquisite frowned. She had noticed this place when her very high sense first scanned the planet, but all she knew was that the sea at the core seemed to be undergoing nuclear fusion. She hadn't realized that the small crocodile god resided here. Padong, still carrying the small crocodile god, the big one plunged into the sea. The creature moved as if the horrifying heat at the center of this planet was no more than an ordinary hot spring. The small crocodile god sent a low rumble toward Han Sen and the others. It told them to continue following. Crocodile gods, your bodies might be able to endure the heat, but ours cannot, Han Sen said with dismay. Just standing next to the sea made him feel as if his Dongshin armor was melting. It wouldn't hold if he had to enter the dark red lava. The big crocodile god's body flashed with a black light, which flew over to surround Han Sen and the others. The burning sensation of the intense heat disappeared. The small crocodile god rumbled at them again, like it was hurrying them to follow. The big crocodile god didn't have that much patience. As Han Sen and the others still hesitated to follow them in, their bodies suddenly felt so heavy. They sank into the sea, dropping into it like dumplings. Luckily, they had the black aura for protection, which kept the heat from harming them. The powerful force of gravity continued to pull them deeper into the lava, though. When their vision returned, they were already out of the burning sea. They had reached the center of the planet, and yet it was like a city. No lava was visible anywhere, but what they saw shocked the three of them. Even Exquisite's eyes grew round. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The planet's core had buildings like a space fortress. It was obviously man-made. It couldn't have been naturally generated. The whole of the space castle gave off a technological feel. Everything was made from crystal, but that magical space fortress was in disarray. It had been badly ruined, so most of the very complicated crystal machinery that Han Sen could see everywhere had stopped working. Only a few were running, with lights blinking across them like pleas for help. Upon seeing the space fortress and machines, Han Sen was shocked. He almost screamed out, "No way! Why does this place look like a crystallizer control room?" As Han Sen glanced around, he thought the buildings in this place looked exactly like a crystallizer control room. Li Qier commented on it, saying, "The style of architecture must mean this place belonged to the crystallizers." Exquisite nodded and said, "This should indeed be a crystallizer structure." The genes of the crystallizers didn't evolve much, but their technological prowess was exceptional. They ended up challenging the real demons, which were rank 13, but if they had gone for a lower rank high race somewhere in the top 100, they would have become a high race through their technological power. Li Qier was interested, and so she said, "I have heard the crystallizers almost beat the real demons, and they only lost because of the Extreme King's interference. Is that true?" Exquisite shook her head. "I don't know about that, but according to the records of our race, after the lamp was turned off, another race joined the fight. That race wasn't the Extreme King, though. What race was it then?" Han Sen couldn't help ask. Exquisite didn't mind answering, and so she casually said, "I don't know. It was an army composed of people from all sorts of different races. They never explained where they were from." Poor crystallizers. Despite their shortcomings, they strove so hard to overcome the challenges of the universe. They did so by crafting technology because it was what they had at their disposal. Reaching the heights that they did through technology alone couldn't have been an easy accomplishment. Li Qier sighed with dismay. While they were talking, they followed the two crocodile gods into the crystallizer fortress. The stuff there had been badly damaged. There were broken buildings and machines strewn about, but they didn't see any remains of the fortress's former inhabitants. The whole fortress was composed of buildings and machines. The big crocodile god continued to lead them through the ruined fortress, though it gave them no indication of where they were going. It's pretty obvious by now that this place once belonged to the crystallizers, but only kings can enter the core area. How would they have been able to get here from the outside universe? Even if they somehow managed that feat, how would they get through the sea of lava to the core of this planet? Li Qier asked, looking around. Crystallizers could do things that other races can't. It's hard to say anything about the crystallizers, because their technology opened a wide range of possibilities. Their technology could have brought them here safely, even though such a trip would have been impossible for others. But what were they thinking by building a fortress here? Exquisite looked around and thought aloud. Han Sen was also examining the fortress as they walked. This place was similar to the crystallizer control room he had once been inside. Crystallizer technology was everywhere, but he didn't know how to make use of their gear. It's a shame that stay up late isn't here. If he was, he might be able to say a thing or two about this place, Han Sen thought. Suddenly, Han Sen was given a shock. Deep within the fortress, they came upon a large area that looked like a warehouse. Inside that place, there were many crystal canisters. They were lined up like a row of pillars that were 100 meters tall. Most of the cylinders in the front seemed to be shattered. There were only 2 or 3 that were still whole, and inside them, there were chained demon crocodiles. They were not crocodile gods. They looked like the big ones on the planet's surface that were dark red. Those chained demon crocodiles with bat wings were soaking inside the crystal test tubes that were full of fluids. They looked like dead bodies submerged in tanks of formaldehyde in a laboratory. Exquisite and Likir noticed those tubes and stared at them. They approached them and saw that there were many more crystal canisters. There were a few dozen rows of them. Each row had 15 canisters. Most of the canisters were broken. There were less than 10 that were in an okay condition, and each of those had a chained demon crocodile occupant. Weird. The crystallizers came all the way here to capture the chained demon crocodiles? Likir was confused. This isn't right, Exquisite suddenly said. What isn't right? Likir looked at Exquisite as she asked. Based on how these canisters are lined up and the location of each chained demon crocodile, the other canisters should have held chained demon crocodiles, too. But they aren't here, and their dead bodies aren't here, either, Exquisite said. Maybe they ran away? Likir said. Exquisite shook her head. That isn't important. Each canister has a king-class chained demon crocodile inside it. If each canister contained one of these, think about how many chained demon crocodiles there were in total. I'm afraid the whole population of chained demon crocodiles doesn't equal the number that could be stored here. Likir hadn't considered that. Maybe the other canisters weren't intended to hold demon crocodiles. But regardless of what they held, there should still be bodies lying around outside the broken containers, Likir said. Exquisite didn't object to her line of thinking this time. The good canisters were randomly positioned amongst the broken canisters. There didn't appear to be any order. Perhaps it wasn't an accident that there were king-class demon crocodiles inside the canisters. Maybe there had been demon crocodiles inside the broken ones before. But if they were all king demon crocodiles, that didn't seem to make sense with what they knew of the current crocodile population. It really was hard to believe. The 3 of them followed the crocodile gods around the area. They eventually saw a semicircular crystallizer building ahead of them. It was made of transparent crystal, but their view inside was still obscured. They couldn't see what was on the interior of the building. The crocodile god walked into the building, which was around the size of a stadium. Han Sen and the others had no choice but to follow them inside. After they entered, the 3 of them were shocked. They could see that this place had a swimming pool. There was also a man-made beach, which made it look like an ocean. Scattered across the place were many benches. The big crocodile god climbed atop a sunbathing chair with its belly facing outwards. It relaxed as it enjoyed the seashore like a gangster boss. All it needed was a shirt and a pair of shorts. The small crocodile god ran across the sand, and then it ran back. Its mouth now held a rope, and it was hauling a box toward them. Han Sen watched the small crocodile god drag the box in front of them. Then, it rumbled at them. Likir knew what the little crocodile god meant. She opened the box and saw many tools inside. She suddenly had a bad feeling about this. Although the 3 of them had never seen crystallizer tools before, they were certain that was what filled the box. They did not know what the tools did, though, but judging from their shape, it was possible to imagine them as tools for construction work. As the small crocodile god rumbled and Likir explained, Han Sen quickly realized the bad feelings were coming true. The crocodiles intended to use the 3 of them as workers. The crocodile god wanted to use them as slaves, so they could repair and clean up the space fortress. After understanding what the small crocodile god meant, Exquisite and Likir looked terrible. They had never done anything like this for the very high. Now, 2 crocodiles were treating them as maids. It made them feel so ill that they wanted to pass out. Han Sen picked up the tools and headed toward the swimming pool. He didn't mind working. By doing this, he'd be able to walk around the whole fortress, which might give him the opportunity to find something. Right now, he was quite curious about the nature of the location he had ended up in. Exquisite and Likir were aware of what Han Sen wanted. So, They reluctantly picked up their tools and went with him. But before they exited the immediate area, the small crocodile god stopped them. It lifted a clawed hand to point at the rubbish scattered across the beach. It wanted them to clean up the beach area first. Han Sen exited the swimming pool with the toolbox in hand. The crocodile god didn't follow him. He wasn't in a rush to clean, so he took the chance to walk around the fortress while he was able to. The fortress was in poor condition. Most of the machinery had been destroyed in whatever cataclysmic event had ended the life of this place. Even when he saw a machine that wasn't broken, Han Sen had no clue what all the gadgets and gizmos were supposed to do. Anyway, strangely, though, aside from the demon crocodiles and the canisters, he hadn't seen any other bodies. He couldn't even find any long-forgotten bones. Judging from the way the buildings and equipment is all broken, this place must have come under fire from a hail of meteors. But why can I not see what rained down on the place? As Han Sen continued to think about the problem, he went back to the plaza with the crystal canisters. He had settled on investigating that place first. The demon crocodiles there exhibited no semblance of a life force. Inside those broken canisters, there was nothing. There were no bodies, and whatever liquid they might once have contained had all dried up, not leaving a single drop of the stuff behind. Weird. Does that mean the crystal canisters themselves were empty? Han Sen frowned and kept walking forward. Han Sen looked at all the crystal canisters. They all looked the same, and he didn't think there was anything amiss. Suddenly, Han Sen stopped before one shattered crystal canister in particular. Beneath that shattered crystal canister, he found something. Under the shattered crystal, he found a man's hand. It looked very big, and its skin was rather dark. The most important thing about it, though, was that it was in perfect shape. It showed no signs of decomposition. Han Sen would have taken it for a living man's hand if he hadn't felt that there was no life force coming from it. Han Sen was so excited about making this discovery. He moved the shattered crystal to reveal more of the hand. Han Sen found that it was actually a whole arm. There was no body attached to it, though. The arm had been severed around the shoulder. The arm was very muscular. Judging from its length, the person who had that arm had to have been 2 meters tall. He would have been a very powerful man. On the side of the arm, near the bicep, there was a tattoo. The art depicted a clown, and it was dark red. The tattoo clown appeared to be jumping. Its legs were spread as if it had just taken a mighty leap. The clown's face was facing forward, and there were 2 horns on its hat. Its eyes were small, and it was smiling. Han Sen didn't find the tattoo amusing. The clown was strange, and its smile made Han Sen feel very uncomfortable. Han Sen set the arm back down and went back to cleaning the shattered bits of crystal. He was hoping to find the body that the arm had come from. He wanted to find out who the man might have been. The broken chunks of crystal were heavier than steel, but to Han Sen, they were nothing. He quickly managed to brush all the broken crystals aside. However, oddly enough, he didn't find any evidence of a body underneath the destroyed crystal canister. In fact, there wasn't even a blood splatter. Han Sen used his purple-eye butterfly to check the area out. He didn't know if the rest of the body had never been there or if it had simply degraded over time, but aside from the arm, there were no leftover substances of anything else. Was this arm chopped off elsewhere, then brought here at a later date? Han Sen glanced around. The fortress was like a big city, so searching through all of it would be a difficult task. Han Sen planned to widen his search, but when he turned around to pick up the broken arm, he was given a shock. The broken arm had been perfectly preserved when Han Sen first found it, but after he spent 10 minutes cleaning up the broken crystals, it was totally rotten. Only its bones remained. The dark skin and strong muscles had become a pile of reeking gloop. Han Sen was used to seeing dead bodies. He wasn't disgusted by the sight like many people would have been, but he did feel strange. This arm was fine all these years. Why did it suddenly rot just now? Han Sen inspected the rotted arm, staring at it. Only the bones remained now, but he discovered something very special about them. The clown symbol on the skin hadn't disappeared. It was still branded onto the bones of the arm. It still had the same creepy little smile, and the clown was still positioned in mid-step. The dissolving flesh had revealed other markings, as well. The skin had only shown the tattoo of a clown, but the bones were covered in other symbols. Crystallizer text? Han Sen was as shocked as he was happy. He looked at the words, which were written in a tiny, crowded script. Without his purple-eyed butterfly, he would probably have needed a high-tech microscope to examine what the text said. Han Sen had learned the language of the crystallizers from Stay Up Late, so he knew what the words meant. Even as he examined the text, he still thought it was weird that someone had carved words into their bones. Plus, the arm had been perfect. How had someone carved directly on the bone without harming the surrounding skin and muscles? Han Sen picked up the bones from the pile of gloop. He cleaned away the mess that had accumulated so that he could get a better look at them. The bones were pale, and he couldn't detect any semblance of a life force. But he could tell that the clown symbol and the text had been etched in by a machine. It was engraved, not branded. What is going on here? How could someone use a machine to write words onto their bones? Did someone write this after the person died? Han Sen thought to himself as he tried reading the text. M67 test subject had abnormal changes. Test results are unknown. Number 7586 core creation of a god failed. Han Sen read it out. It seemed like some sort of report log. Han Sen didn't know what M67 meant. Judging from the contents, though, it appeared that the crystallizers had been trying to create a god and something happened to the test subject. Then, the test concluded. And there were some numbers Han Sen did not understand the relevance of. They were associated with the data on how M67 had mutated. He didn't know why all of this was written on the bones of the arm. Were these people crazy? This data and information could have been stored on a crystallizer flash drive. Why carve it into bone? There had to be a reason for them doing this. Han Sen stared at the text on the bone in consternation. As Han Sen was thinking about this, he heard a low roar from the small crocodile god. It swung its tail in annoyance as it approached him. It growled again as if it was hurrying him. It didn't like the fact that Han Sen was sitting there doing nothing. Han Sen thought for a while. He brought a few pieces of fruit out of Destiny's tower to give to the crocodile god. This little crocodile god is just a baby. It should be an easy thing to please. All I need to do is keep it happy, then I can do anything I want. I wonder if it is a vegetarian? I don't have much meat stockpiled at the moment. Ever since Han Sen started collecting King xenogeneic genes, he hadn't been eating anything else. The fruit was something he had saved for Bauer, but ever since Bauer had found that purple ginseng, she hadn't shown interest in anything else. No other type of fruit enticed her, so Han Sen had been keeping them inside Destiny's tower the whole time. If someone wanted their body to evolve, the process would take a lot more than just practicing various genoarts. The higher class a person was, the more energy their body would require. And the food they consumed had to be of greater quality. That was the only way to deliver the extra needed energy. Every creature in the universe had to eat. The only differences were in how and what they ate. High-class elites could go without food for a long time, but the price they paid for that was the consumption of their energy. If that went on for a long time, their bodies would be damaged quite severely. When people said they didn't need to eat while practicing, it was a load of rubbish. In real life, you would die if you didn't eat. The starvation process just took a little longer for strong people than for the weak. This didn't just apply to warriors with ordinary levels of power. In Han Sen's experience, even guys that called themselves God had to eat, too. But instead of eating flesh, they ate the lifespan of the people that came to them to make wishes. The little crocodile god had to eat, too, but it didn't show any interest in the fruit Han Sen had given it. It used its tail to sweep all the pieces of fruit away. It looks like it doesn't eat fruit or veggies. In that case, what kind of food does it eat? Han Sen tried to guess, but he had no meat to share. Then again, Han Sen doubted that the creature wanted to eat meat, either. If it had, Han Sen, liqueur, and exquisite would have already become crocodile chow. The little god crocodile growled at Han Senator. This was the second time, and it was clearly rushing Han Sen to get to work. And so he did, clearing the shattered crystals all around him. The little crocodile god had assumed the role of the inspector. It commanded Han Sen to do things, like throwing the shattered crystals out of the fortress and into the lava sea that was held at bay outside. Han Sen wasn't in a rush, and neither was he annoyed. He just stuck to his tasks of sweeping and cleaning up, hoping to find something useful as he went. The small god crocodile was pleased with Han Sen's work ethic. The little crocodile god seemed born to be a supervisor, and it seemed very pleased to be doing this sort of work. But Han Sen failed to find anything interesting as he went. And when the little god crocodile eventually grew bored, it brought Han Sen back to the swimming pool with it. When Han Sen arrived back at the swimming pool, he found Likir and Exquisite giving the big crocodile god a head massage. They were using a brush to scrub its body too. Likir and Exquisite looked like a perfect picture of misery. They had never dreamed of being forced to do something this demeaning. They had been taught that as members of the very high, their futures held incredible potential. They had dreamed of doing many things, but never of working as a crocodile's maids, especially with someone like Dollar around to see their humiliation. The big crocodile god was a harsh taskmaster, but Likir and Exquisite were eventually allowed a break. "Did you find anything around here?" Exquisite asked Han Sen, as the two of them approached. "Just more shattered crystal. There doesn't seem to be a single thing of interest, otherwise." Han Sen had already stuffed the arm bones into his Destiny's Tower. He didn't plan on informing the girls about his discovery. "What about you two?" Han Sen asked. "What could we find? All we've been doing is sweeping up crap all day. I have no idea how these two eat so much. They piss wherever they like, too," Likir said, her expression morose. Han Sen's heart leaped. He quickly asked, "Can you tell me what they've been eating? How the hell should I know what they eat? Their dung is like firm orbs. It looks just like the materials that make up the planet itself," Likir said. "In that case, maybe they are eating material that comes from the planet," Han Sen said after a moment of thought. "What is the point of knowing what they eat?" Likir asked. "It would let us rest easy in the knowledge that they don't want to eat us, at least." "If that's the case, we are quite lucky," Han Sen said with a shrug of his shoulders. "If I'm going to be trapped in here for the rest of my life, I think I would rather die." Likir didn't agree with Han Sen's line of thinking. "We aren't carrying much food ourselves. We need to find a way to get out of here," Exquisite said. "Do you know a way out of here?" Han Sen asked. "Not right now." Exquisite shook her head. "Then there's no point in talking about it," Han Sen said gloomily. The three of them rested for a while. The little crocodile god soon came over, hurrying them back to work. Out of the three, Han Sen had the best chance of working outside the pool area. The two girls were worse off, as they were stuck serving the crocodile god on the beach. They swept up crap or massaged the crocodile scales. They were just like maids. It was likely that the crocodiles were the only beings in the universe using two of the very high as maids, but God only knew how long they would enjoy this service. Han Sen was outside, setting toppled pieces of equipment upright or cleaning up devices that had been completely destroyed. In the beginning, the little crocodile god was really interested in ordering him around, but after a while, it became too lazy and stopped. Once he was free of his miniature overlord, Han Sen could walk around the fortress. While looking through a random plaza, he finally found something. Crystal was a technological product. It wasn't normally used to create things like tablets, but in that plaza, Han Sen found a crystal wall with text on it. Because the crystal wall was broken, it took Han Sen almost 3 days to collect all of the fragments and piece the wall back together. Then, he was able to read the text in full. Crystal Furnace Skill. This seems to be a Geno art, but the name is very weird. I wonder what it does. Han Sen began reading through the content a little more closely. After all, the Geno arts of the crystallizers were usually quite suitable for humans to practice. But Han Sen wasn't very hopeful for the potential of a crystallizer Geno art, because the crystallizers weren't very famous for their Geno arts. Their skills were rarely exceptional. But after Han Sen read about the crystal furnace, he was given a fright. This wasn't exactly a Geno art. It was a godly skill for people who love to eat. The crystal furnace was a way to reinforce one's stomach. It was different from consume, which focused on the ability to digest food. By contrast, the crystal furnace turned one's stomach into a nuclear reactor. It quickly released the energy of food, and the energy released would be immediately absorbed. The waste would come out quickly. No wonder the crystallizers have such a reputation for research and development. Even their Geno arts are scientific. Han Sen loved it. He wouldn't turn down a new Geno art that aided his digestion. But when Han Sen reached the end of the text for Crystal Furnace, he saw an additional note. The public version of Crystal Furnace is only suitable for kids below 16. For those who are above 16, please practice Crystal Core Reactor. This is the kids' version? Han Sen was annoyed by that, but he couldn't find the adult version of Crystal Furnace, so he had to learn the kids' version first. Han Sen memorized the Crystal Furnace skill. Then he broke the crystal wall back down and tossed the remains into the burning sea. Although the crocodile god hadn't clamped down on his freedom to explore, Han Sen knew that a being of such power would be to control the whole fortress. If Han Sen did something bad, like opening his core area hall, he would be immediately stopped. So, Han Sen didn't make any reckless escape attempts. Instead, he did legitimate work, shoveling and cleaning things up properly. He cleaned like a man who had come from a long line of noble janitors. The crystallizers were a race that focused on technology. Unfortunately, it meant there were few leads for Han Sen to follow up on. There were many tools available, but Han Sen didn't know how to make use of any of them. Most of the machines were probably too broken to be repaired. Anyway, as he continued to fail to find anything useful, Han Sen became less and less enthused with cleaning. He tried bringing out many items to attract the attention of the little crocodile god, but the creature wasn't interested in any of the things he offered to it. Clearly, Han Sen had no idea what it fancied. Exquisite and Likier kept trying to escape, but all their attempts failed. They were in more of a rush to get out of there than Han Sen was. However, every time they tried to run, the crocodile god's control of gravity pulled them back. They were unable to teleport away, either. One day, as Han Sen was cleaning up a fallen room, he found a table. What is this? The table and the room's equipment were all broken. The table was cut in half, and all 4 of the table's legs were broken. But there was a drawer under the table that hadn't been damaged. Due to the fact that the table had been broken, the drawer had popped open. After quickly rummaging through it, Han Sen found a box. The box was made of wood, which was rare to see in a crystallizer's territory. Han Sen opened the lid and found a pair of glasses inside. The glasses sort of looked like sunglasses. They looked really cool, and the glass itself was dark like charcoal. They didn't look see-through at all. What is this rare and strange item? Were these glasses intended for a blind man? Han Sen murmured as he fiddled with the item. There was nothing weird about them, and so he simply put them on. The moment Han Sen put them on, the pitch-black glasses grew transparent like crystal. No, they were more transparent than crystal. When Han Sen looked out through the glasses, he couldn't even see the glass that was resting across his own face. And as this happened, lots of data began to scroll across the screen of the glasses. The data whizzed by in a blur, and Han Sen soon heard a voice. It seemed to be coming from the glasses, but it played directly in Han Sen's ears. System scanning. Genes confirmed. Crystallizer identity confirmed. Crystal Furnace data opened. Han Sen suspected that this was a high-tech piece of equipment since it could scan one's genes. When the voice grew quiet, though, Han Sen couldn't feel anything different. The lights and numbers on the glasses had disappeared. Aside from that initial procedure, nothing seemed to be happening. Hey, are you still there? Han Sen asked the glasses. Please don't ask dumb questions. The Crystal Furnace carries intelligence and sense. Please align yourself with intelligence to avoid sending the Crystal Furnace unnecessary messages. It is a waste of energy. Han Sen heard the voice directly in his head, and he suppressed a sigh. A pair of glasses didn't like him. So, Han Sen said one word, but then he decided to be quiet. He spent a moment thinking about what he should say first. He ended up telling the glasses, "Your name is Crystal Furnace, right? What functions can you perform?" My full name is ZXD27 Crystal Furnace Database. I am in charge of feeding juveniles. The voice of the glasses played in Han Sen's ears again. ZX, what? I am just going to call you Glasses. And what did you say about feeding juveniles? Han Sen asked. I am designed to aid babies in growing up healthily, Glasses answered. Be specific. What can you do for babies? Han Sen asked after a second. The main services I provide are collecting a person's data and analyzing it with the Crystal Furnace database. That explanation didn't really help Han Senator clearly. Glasses wasn't that smart. Glasses seemed to be able to sense what Han Sen was thinking. It said, ZXD27 Crystal Furnace Database is the greatest piece of crystallizer technology. It has an intelligence growth system. The starting intelligence level is that of a 5-year-old crystallizer child. That's pretty good, Han Sen complimented Glasses, but he was still unable to figure out what it did. As Han Sen tried to think of a way to ask Glasses more about its purpose, he saw Exquisite approaching from the swimming pool. Han Sen's heart jumped. He used his mind and spoke to Glasses. Let's be more pragmatic. Do you have a see-through function that allows you to see through walls? Or maybe clothes? Han Sen remembered that pairs of glasses in fiction often had that function. He had his Dongxian aura, but he couldn't use it to see through clothes. If Glasses had that function, then maybe the device wasn't too shabby. Voyeurism goes against crystallizer law, Article 16221. Violations can result in prison sentences of 5 to 10 years. ZXD27 is an AI for children, and so it does not allow that function. A professional worker allowance card is required to enable that function on your Crystal Furnace database. Are the crystallizers such good people? After mulling that over, Han Sen sighed. Then, what is it that you do? Show me, Han Sen said finally. Please select a target, the pair of glasses said. I want her, Han Sen said as he directed his gaze at Exquisite, who was coming over. Symbols and data suddenly ran across Glasses' screen. The view of Exquisite zoomed in slightly, like a camera was focusing on her. The crosshairs locked on tight as Glasses started its analysis. The glasses didn't release any light or anything, so Han Sen didn't know how Glasses was performing its analysis. Collecting data, analyzing data. Exquisite was already in front of him by now, and the device was continuing to scroll through data. This thing is so slow. It's as laggy as a dying computer, Han Sen thought to himself. Why are you wearing black glasses that you can't see through? Are you pretending to be a blind man? Exquisite said, peering at Han Sen's face. Yeah, I'm just messing around, Han Sen said casually, but he was actually thinking. It looks like I'm the only person who can see through the glasses. If other people look at the glasses, all they see is black. This is quite smart. At this time, the voice in the glasses spoke in Han Sen's head again. Scanning was successful. The data has been successfully analyzed. Han Sen observed the image of Exquisite and the data being displayed on Glasses' screen. There was a report, too. Target, very high female. Han Sen looked at the first few words in front of him in stunned silence. Are you mistaken? Isn't she one of the sky? Why does it say she is one of the very high? Han Sen asked Glasses in his mind. He was trying to keep his surprise under wraps while he read through the rest of the report. Target, very high female. Gene age calculation, 23 years. Gene level, 9th tier king. Gene potential, 5 stars. Crystal Furnace database has a lot of gene data concerning the very high. Based on the target's genes, her genes match the very high profile at a rate of 87.675%. The genes that associate her with the sky compose 0.3% of her form. Likelihood of target being a member of the very high is 99.99%, Glasses answered. Han Sen believed it. He already knew that Exquisite was 9th tier king, which proved that Glasses wasn't talking nonsense. Right. I never heard about Likir and Exquisite in Sky Palace because they don't belong to the sky, Han Sen surmised. Then what does their gene potential mean? What is the highest star rating achievable? Han Sen asked. The gene potential means how much a creature can grow. According to the Crystal Furnace database, there are 10 stars in total, Glasses answered. No way. There are 10 stars in total, and a member of the very high only has 5. Han Sen was very suspicious about these results due to the fact that the very high were one of the strongest races in the entire universe. Even if their genes weren't the best, they shouldn't have been as low as 5 stars. What are you doing, waiting around here? Exquisite asked with a frown. Han Sen was just standing there staring at her. It's nothing. I was just thinking of a way to get out of here, Han Sen said. So, did you think of a way? Exquisite asked. No, Han Sen shook his head. Then let's just wait for rescue. We have been missing for a while. Our people will probably think of a way to save us, Exquisite said. Then, she left. Han Sen opened his mouth. He wanted to ask if she was one of the very high, but if she was choosing not to divulge that information herself, there had to be a reason. He knew that very well, considering that he didn't go around telling everyone that he was a human. With that in mind, he decided not to ask. For a king, 5 stars is top class. Only deified start at 6 stars for analysis, Glasses answered. I see. How many stars do I have? Han Sen asked out of curiosity. Collecting data? Analyzing data? Analyzing? Glasses' data collection started going through the motions, except this time it was taking far longer. Genes are unstable. Cannot confirm. Cannot confirm? The data collection kept going on, and it didn't seem as if it was going to stop. It doesn't matter, I suppose. There is no need to continue testing, Han Sen said. Glasses had continued to say, cannot confirm, which Han Sen found annoying. Glasses quieted down, and the data on the screen vanished. Right, let's go and see how the big and little crocodile gods rank on this thing, Han Sen thought. His heart already beating a little faster, Han Sen headed for the swimming pool. Han Sen saw the big crocodile god still asleep on the sunbathing chair with Li Qier massaging its head. Curiosity rose in Han Sen, and he found himself wanting to test out Li Qier first. The results were similar to Exquisite's, and it turned out that Li Qier was one of the very high, too. She also had 5 stars, but she was younger. According to the crystallizer's gene calculations, Li Qier was only 16. This time, I believe you. Han Sen turned and looked at the big crocodile god. He saw the icon spinning as the device collected data, but after a while passed, it hadn't come up with any results. There's no way you cannot analyze that. Han Sen started to doubt whether or not the glasses were working properly. But then, he saw the image and data of the crocodile god appear. Target: Gravity Crocodile God Female. Gene age calculation: 1.365 billion years. Gene level: Transmutation deified. Gene potential: 7 star. Your analysis is so inaccurate. A deified of the transmutation rank only has a potential of 7 stars. Han Sen was doubting the analysis Glasses was providing again. Gravity Crocodile God's genes are only 4 stars. There is a limit to the rank that it can achieve. It cannot become fully deified because, even after modification, its gene potential will only rise to 7 stars. It can never exceed the rank of transmutation. If there are no gene mutations, the chance of reaching larva class is 1 in a billion. Seriously? You have that much deified data to compare with? Han Sen asked skeptically. This is the result after comparisons with the samples of other deified creatures. According to the database, without a 9-star potential, a deified creature can never become a true god, Glasses answered. Han Sen looked at the little crocodile god with much suspicion. Glasses worked again, and the data symbols started to spin. After a while, Han Sen was finally able to read the results. Target: Gravity Crocodile God Male. Gene age calculation: 1 month, 7 days. Gene level: Primitive deified. Gene potential: 9 stars. Holy **T. This guy is a gravity crocodile god. Why does it have 9 stars? Han Sen asked. This gravity crocodile god was born deified. Its genes mutated, becoming far better than the old ones. According to the genes shared, they must be mother and son. Seriously? This small thing has the potential to become a true god? Han Sen looked at the small crocodile god with a fire in his eyes. The little crocodile god realized Han Sen was staring at it. So, it looked at Han Sen with disdain. But Exquisite was still scrubbing the creature's scales, so it didn't do anything. A 9-star deified xenogenic can become a true god, but it isn't guaranteed, Glasses answered. Han Sen ignored Glasses as he tried to think of a way to kidnap the small crocodile god. That thing could one day become a true god. But Han Sen remembered that he couldn't take a core xenogenic away from there. So, kidnapping would be pointless. After considering the results delivered by Glasses, Han Sen decided to place his faith in them. If the crystallizers had designed this device by themselves, they wouldn't have been able to gather so much data on deified creatures. But the elders of the crystallizers helped Sacred Leader analyze the story of genes, and they eventually took over the sanctuaries. Han Sen believed they must have received some data from Sacred. For someone like Sacred Leader, it wouldn't have been too difficult to collect data on deified beings. Back then, the very high and ancient god were far below Sacred. The extreme king were servants of Sacred. If Sacred Leader wanted their gene data, it would have been very easy for him to collect it. After all, gathering gene data didn't require the deaths of the deifieds. It would only require a hair or a small sample of DNA. If Sacred Leader wanted a strand of hair, who would dare to turn down his request? Now, Han Sen just wanted to go home and try it out on his baby daughter Linger. He wanted to see how much gene potential she had. But as long as he was under the control of the big and little crocodile gods, he couldn't go anywhere. Leaving wasn't an option just yet. Han Sen was going to remain patient and keep cleaning up the fortress in case there was anything else there for him to find. Glasses only scanned, analyzed, and compared. It didn't do anything else. Han Sen searched for a few more days, but he didn't find any goodies. However, in that time, Han Sen's crystal furnace reached beginner level. After all, it was a geno-art for crystallizer children. It wasn't very difficult to come to grips with, and having crystal blood made it even easier to learn. Humans were the offspring of crystallizers, so crystallizer geno-arts were quite compatible with human physiology. It only took Han Sen a few days to learn the geno-art, and he produced some good results to boot. Now, Han Sen was able to eat 20 to 30 king xenogeneic genes a day, and that was just at the beginner level of crystal furnace. If consume, big destroyed, and crystal furnace all reached peak performance, he calculated that he could eat at least 110 xenogeneic genes a day. Crystal furnace isn't bad. I need to teach it to Bauer and Linger, too. When Han Sen thought about his baby daughters, it felt as if he took an arrow to the heart. But escaping the fortress wouldn't be easy. In the past, he would have tried to escape using his super god body. Because Wanner was in his Destiny's Tower, however, he couldn't use his super god body for very long. Making his escape would take longer than he could maintain his invincible form. Han Sen sat down and rested. He brought out one of his alliance beverages and had a couple of sips. But after he did, the little crocodile god ran over to him and stared at the bottle of wine. It seemed very curious. Han Sen raised an eyebrow. He pulled out a cup and poured some wine for the small crocodile god. This time, the little crocodile didn't smack the cup away with its tail. It rolled out its tongue and tentatively approached the cup. Han Sen was so happy. At first, he thought that the little crocodile enjoyed drinking, but instead, the crocodile god used its tongue to lift the cup and splash itself with the contents. Its scales were very high in temperature. The creature had tried to lower the heat of its scales, but when the wine touched its body, the liquid flashed into steam. The small crocodile god looked unsatisfied. So, it used its tongue to snatch the entire bottle of wine this time. It appended the bottle over itself. As he watched the wonderful wine boil away, Han Sen's heart ached. It was a bottle of the wine that Ji Yinran had prepared for him. It was a century old, and it could no longer be purchased anywhere. It was a very rare item, but the small crocodile god seemed to really enjoy it, and its body reeked of alcohol. The little crocodile god made an inquisitive rumbling noise as Han Sen mourned the loss of his wine. It turned out that the crocodile wanted more. "I don't have any more wine. If you want, I can go back and get you some more," Han Sen offered to the small crocodile god. The little creature nodded and gave a low roar, as if it was hurrying Han Sen to go and fetch the wine. "You will let me go back? If that's true, then I will leave." Han Sen didn't really believe that the creature would let him go so easily. If people left the core area, they would return to the same spot that they had left. Unless they never entered the core area again, they'd be trapped. But Han Sen was different. Because he had 4 self-cogwheels, he could show up in 4 different locations. He didn't need to return to this location. If he could leave, he would be set free. The small crocodile god hurried him to leave and bring back wine. So, Han Sen generated the power to open the door to the core hall. He said to the small crocodile god, "I really am going." The core hall's door was open, and the small crocodile god made no effort to stop him. And neither did the big crocodile god. For all intents and purposes, he had permission to leave. Han Sen was so happy. He hadn't thought that he would ever be able to leave that place so easily. So, he quickly hurried through the hall's door. The small crocodile god made no effort to stop him, and so Han Sen successfully managed to leave the core area. He returned to the safety of the white whale. His exit was so smooth that he could barely believe it. "Dad, you were gone for so long. Next time you go on such a long trip, can you take me with you?" Bauer jumped into Han Sen's arms. "You can't go to that place." Han Sen smiled. Han Sen couldn't take people or creatures there, and even if he could, he wouldn't dare do it. If a child entered the core area, they would have to be king class. And that meant people, upon seeing a small child enter, would go crazy. Seeing Bauer smile, Han Sen's heart felt warm. He used glasses to analyze Bauer's genes. Han Sen didn't want to find out how much potential Bauer had. He wanted to know what Bauer's race was. Bauer's race had always been a mystery, so maybe the glasses could help to resolve it once and for all. The data scan of the glasses kept scrolling. A while went by, and the analysis cycled on and on. It gave Han Sen a bad feeling. Lack of data. Cannot analyze. Cannot analyze. When Han Sen heard those words, he was disappointed. But no matter what race Bauer was, Han Sen didn't care. As far as he was concerned, she was his genuine daughter. Han Sen was going to let glasses stop, but then he heard a voice. Analysis complete. The genes are unstable. Gene level cannot be confirmed. Gene potential cannot be confirmed. You are her parent. *T. This thing really is for kids. It isn't reliable, Han Sen thought in annoyance. After half a day of waiting, that was the result he got. Han Sen used glasses to look at everyone on the white whale. Aside from Elysian Moon and Gu Qingqing, who came from the sanctuaries, the others were analyzed in great detail and with an impressive amount of accuracy. Elysian Moon and Gu Qingqing had the same results as Han Sen. Their genes were unstable, and they couldn't be analyzed. Han Sen tried using glasses to analyze the little red bird. He didn't have much hope for success, but he was presented with something interesting. Target: Phoenix, 51%, and Fishbird, 49%, female. Gene class: original deified. Gene potential: 10 stars. There were many detailed pieces of information being analyzed, and it all shocked Han Sen. He hadn't expected the little red bird's blood to be that powerful. Its 10-star gene potential practically guaranteed that it would become a true god. His gene blood is that strong? Han Sen curiously asked Glasses. Glasses answered, Phoenixes and fishbirds are true gods. It has the blood of both, and while its growth speed might be slow, there is a high chance it can become a true god. Its chances of failure are practically zero, but it will require a lot of materials to become a true god. It has a higher chance than a creature that is born purely a phoenix or a fishbird. After Han Sen heard this, he closed his eyes in exhaustion for a long moment. He had been growing the little red bird all this time, and upon hearing this, he now knew he would have to gather a lot more resources for the bird in the future. Han Sen looked at the others in the white whale and assumed that the information on them was accurate. Then, he looked at Warner, who was asleep in Destiny's tower. Glasses had to run longer for her than it did for the little red bird, but only one word was presented as a result: sacred. There was nothing more than that. It analyzed the race, but the only result was a name. There were no details or other content. Han Sen returned to his home in the Alliance. He wanted to test Glasses on his daughter Han Linger and see how much potential she had. Soon after trying, though, he was forced to acknowledge that you could never tell how much potential a human had. It would always say the genes of a human were unstable and unable to be determined. The creatures could have their potential and blood calculated, though. The results were promising, and some of them had a 5-star gene potential. Because they hadn't reached deified class, though, 5 stars were the highest their potentials could go. After becoming deified, their gene potentials could be tested again, and thus the tests at that time would be more accurate. It was like there was a distinction between those who were deified and those who weren't. No wonder the elites didn't want me before. Now it makes sense. Are the genes of humans really that unstable? Han Sen wondered. Daddy, hug. Linger was able to talk pretty well. She reached out her pale little hands as she ran to Han Sen. My little baby, let Daddy kiss you. Han Sen lifted Linger and kissed her on the cheeks. When he wasn't trapped, Han Sen came back every day to rest. He had been trapped inside the core area for many days, though, and so he hadn't seen his family. Linger was a good kid, and she didn't cry much. The family did a good job of protecting her, as well. After she was born, she hadn't used her super god spirit again. That came as a relief to Han Sen. Small kids and too much power was a bad combination. Linger hadn't yet learned how strong her powers were, and so she hadn't yet learned how to harness them. If her mood spiraled out of control, it would be a dangerous and frightening thing. Luckily, Linger had a very calm personality, and the family was able to take care of her. So, nothing had gone wrong in his time away. Han Sen hoped Linger would be able to grow up like an ordinary child. He wanted her to have a normal childhood. The last thing he wanted was for her to reach the complexities of adulthood too soon. He rested at home for the night. The next day, he gathered a few cases of wine and took it to the core area. Now that the small crocodile god had allowed him to leave, that meant it was likely he would be able to leave again in the future. Han Sen wasn't in a rush to get out of there, anyway. He wanted to spend more time digging and see what else there was to find in the fortress. Han Sen returned to the core area. When he arrived, the little crocodile god ran frantically over to Han's senator. It roared at him repeatedly, its tone strange and wandering. Perhaps the crocodile was complaining about him being too slow. I was looking for that wine for you. I needed some time, as this stuff is very precious. Han Sen opened a barrel of wine, allowing the intoxicating fragrance to suffuse the area. The small crocodile's eyes brightened. It stopped whining at Han Sen and jumped straight into the barrel of wine. Huge plumes of steam came from the wine barrel, and a second later, the wine was all dry. The small crocodile god jumped out. Before Han Sen could open up the next barrel, the crocodile god was already jumping inside. Han Sen soon realized that the crocodile god didn't want to use the wine for drinking. The crocodile wanted to bathe in it. I have heard of women enjoying baths of milk, but I've never heard of a crocodile wanting to bathe in wine. Han Sen couldn't help but smile as he watched the enthusiastic little creature. The crocodile's scales were very hot, and although it had already tried to cool itself down, the wine was vaporized almost as soon as it entered the barrels. It was unable to take its time and swim around in the barrel's contents. In no time at all, it went through a few barrels of wine. The small crocodile god came out of the last barrel and roared softly at Han's senator. It seemed as if it wanted more. He wanted Han Sen to return and collect more wine for it. This is a very rare treasure. It took me a while to gather these few barrels, so if you want more, you will have to wait a long time, Han Sen said. Han Sen had many barrels of wine in storage, and he could easily buy a few vineyards. He couldn't spoil the small crocodile god, though. He had to plan for the long term. Han Sen brought 2 or 3 barrels for the crocodile each day. It was enough to keep the small creature happy, but it wasn't enough to keep it satisfied. Now, Han Sen no longer had to work. The small crocodile wanted him to just bring it wine, but Han Sen still stuck to his cleaning duties. That was because he could dig wherever he wanted without the explicit command or direction of the little crocodile god. Ever since he found glasses, Han Sen hadn't discovered anything useful. His lack of progress was frustrating. He worked in the fortress for a month, but he didn't find anything else of interest. His jade skin reached the 9th tier, so he couldn't level up anymore even if he continued to consume King Xenogeneic genes. Han Sen then focused on his Blood Pulse Sutra, leaving the story of genes as the last to be leveled up. Exquisite and Likir were so depressed. They could see Han Sen coming and going as if the place was his own backyard. They wanted to leave, too, but no matter how much they tried talking to the 2 crocodile gods, they weren't permitted to go anywhere. They tried to use the wine retrieval excuse, but the crocodile god wasn't interested in what they had to offer. This made them incredibly sad. Han Sen didn't know why the crocodile gods treated them differently, but everything was panning out perfectly for him. Han Sen actually thought it was convenient that the 2 of them were still trapped. If they got free, they might cause him problems of some sort. The very high are nothing that special. They can't even deal with a transmutation deified. They are worse than the ancient god, Han Sen thought to himself. Actually, Han Sen only thought this because he hadn't learned the nature of their strength. The power of the very high didn't lie purely in their combat abilities, and they had nearly limitless resources. If the very high survived long enough, they could become butterflies with ease. That was better than most races. Since he still wasn't managing to dig up any worthwhile items, all Han Sen achieved was making the small crocodile god an alcoholic. Han Sen kept giving it wine, but the creature never drank it. It used every barrel for bathing. It sickened Han Sen to see so much fine wine be wasted. No matter how rich he was, it hurt to see something so precious be poured down the drain. Han Sen examined and excavated the whole fortress, but he didn't find anything useful. He hadn't even been able to find the body that the arm had been attached to. It seemed as if only the arm had been left behind. It looks like I need to find a way out of here. Han Sen wasn't interested in delivering wine to the crocodile gods for the rest of eternity. Lady Exquisite, didn't you say that your elders would come and save you? When are they going to come? Han Sen found a chance to stop by and talk to Exquisite and Likier. I'm not sure. It could take 2 or 3 months, or it could take a couple of years, Exquisite said. Why would it take them so long? Han Sen was shocked. Exquisite didn't answer Han Sen's question. Actually, the very high had self-spells coded into their bodies. If they were in danger or injured, the self-spell would awaken. If they died, the self-spell would self-destruct, and people were sure to know something had happened to them. But Exquisite and Likier were neither injured nor in danger. The self-spell wasn't going to ring its alarm. If the very high people didn't hear anything from the self-spell, they'd have no clue that something had happened to the 2 women. After a while, if Exquisite remained missing, the people of her race would notice her absence. They knew where she had gone, but it was hard to determine when they would notice her absence. While the 2 women were wallowing in their depression, Han Sen set out a grilled goose to munch on. He ate it and drank, picking through a side of fruit as well. They wanted to eat some, too. The very high were admired by all. No matter where Exquisite and Likier went, they were as popular as the stars and the moon. Even when the extreme king's princes and princesses met with them, the royal children would be extra polite to them. They would treat the 2 very high like VIPs at all times, not willing to do anything that might offend them. Now, they had been reduced to this. The crocodiles were treating them like lowly slaves, whereas Dollar was able to eat nice food and drink lovely beverages all day long. He made no effort to help them out. He never shared his food or did much with them. Exquisite and Likier hadn't brought much food of their own. After all, they had God's Wander. They could use Galaxy Teleport to grab what they needed whenever they wanted. They didn't have to bring simple necessities like food with them, but they had finished all their reserves, and there was nothing more for them in that place. They could last another 2 or 3 months by consuming the energy stored in their bodies, but they still wanted to eat food. It was in the nature of their bodies, and they couldn't help it. Exquisite was faring a little better. She had trained her very high sense for a long time, so her detachment from personal connections, known as forget love, was at a very high level. It helped her separate herself from worldly desires. Likier, however, was in dire straits. She couldn't control her temptation for food. Dollar, can you sell us some of your food? Likier asked Han Sen, chewing her lip distractedly. Sure. What would you like to buy? Grilled chicken or grilled goose? Roast lamb or roast pork? You can have something that flies and something that swims. I have everything you could ever need, Han Sen said expansively, agreeing to the request with haste. There is no need to go to such trouble. Just giving us some of that fruit will do, Likier said, eyeing Han Sen's plate that was stuffed with fresh peaches. The very high were like a mix between the sky and humans. They would kill if they had to, but they wouldn't kill for no reason. They didn't like to waste or take lives without purpose. The chicken that Han Sen was eating smelled nice, but it wouldn't provide much energy. There was no point in eating it, so eating the fruit would be better. Sure, 1 fruit meal for a Geno art. Han Sen picked up a peach that was bigger than his fist, and he smiled at Likier. Why don't you just mug me instead? Likier's eyes opened wide at Han's senator. She couldn't believe her ears. The peach was a xenogeneic plant's fruit, but it wasn't high level. Far from it. The fruit was probably ranked no higher than barren. Swapping a fruit like that for a Geno art was practically daylight robbery. It's up to you. I'm not the one who suggested a trade. Han Sen shrugged and began munching on the peach. Juice dribbled from the peach as he bit into it, and a delectable fragrance came wafting out of it. Okay, that branch of fruit for a Geno art. I will make the trade. Likier gritted her teeth and thought to herself, "We, the very high, have a lot of Geno arts. I know enough of them to kill you. If I just give you one random art after another, I will take all of your fruit. Wait, I have a condition. The Geno art you give me must be one I've never learned before," Han Sen said. He was scamming Exquisite and Likier, and he wouldn't feel a tiny bit sorry for doing so. Han Sen had believed them to be Sky, and he hadn't minded helping them. Now that he knew they were from the very high, his feelings toward them had changed. Any of the very high in the core area wouldn't require his help to kill a bronze tripod or a deified xenogeniac. That was just impossible to believe. He knew they were up to something, considering the way they had behaved around him. If they had some sort of ulterior motive, then there was no need for Han Sen to be polite with them. He was going to scam them without remorse. If he hadn't learned who they were, Han Sen would have given them the fruit for free. The fruit wasn't worth much to him, after all. How am I supposed to know what you have learned, and how am I supposed to know what you can or cannot learn? Likier lifted her lips. Tell me the Geno art's name and what it can be used for. I can figure it out for myself, Han Sen said without moving. Okay. Have you heard of the Geno art Dragon Blood Evil Breaker? I can swap that Geno art in exchange for your peach, Likier said carefully. Dragon Blood Evil Breaker was a secret Geno art belonging to the dragon, and outsiders were not permitted to read and learn its secrets. The Very High, however, were an exception to that rule. The Very High had selected many dragons for silkworms, and many of those dragons possessed knowledge of Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. The Very High could sense their progress with it, and see into the secrets shrouding Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. In truth, the same principle applied to all races across the whole Geno universe. The secrets of each individual race's Geno arts meant little before the Very High. They could see through everything. It was just as Likier said. The number of Geno arts she knew about could kill Han Senator. It would be no trouble, and she could easily bring out a few hundred. The Very High had a rule about not teaching others the Geno arts that they had collected. They had many Geno arts from many races. In some ways, their race was like an encyclopedia of Geno arts. Of course, it didn't matter how many Geno arts she had. Likier would not sell them out easily. She knew she would soon have Han Sen as her silkworm, and so she wasn't all that worried. Even so, Likier was only going to present him with the Geno arts of outsiders for now. She wasn't willing to leak the secret Geno arts that belonged to the Very High. Plus, Dragon Blood Evil Breaker required the blood of the dragon race to practice. She decided to mention that one in particular because she didn't think Han Sen could make use of it. She wanted to dishearten him. Fine. Then I will accept the Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. Han Sen agreed to it quickly and tossed her a peach. Han Sen had seen Dragon 1 use Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, and he thought it was a pretty decent Geno art. It was similar to saving money. He didn't know if he could practice it, but simply hearing about it would be helpful. You really want to learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker? Likier was shocked. She then remembered that Dollar had somehow been able to learn Big Destroyed. With that thought, she considered the possibility that he might actually be able to learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker. It made her hesitate. The Very High were strict about their rules. Although they had thousands of Geno arts, with many coming from other races, they weren't allowed to leak them to others. Teaching someone an ordinary Geno art would be okay, but Dragon Blood Evil Breaker was a secret skill of the dragons. If the details of the Geno art became common knowledge, it could affect the dragons. That was something the Very High didn't want to see. Are you just saying whatever you can to get the fruit? Are you hesitating because you don't actually know Dragon Blood Evil Breaker? Han Sen saw Likier hesitate. His expression looked something like a smile, but it wasn't pleasant at all. Of course I know Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, but Likier knew Han Sen was provoking her, but she still hesitated. Make the exchange, Exquisite said suddenly. Third sister, I'm not sure that's a good idea, Likier said to Exquisite. It's fine. I want to see if he can learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, Exquisite said smoothly. Her eyes looked so strange. Likier nodded and turned back to Han Sr. All right. I will swap Dragon Blood Evil Breaker for the fruit. Listen closely because I'm only going to tell you once. Han Sen perked his ears and focused on the skill that Likier began to explain. He didn't know if he could learn it, but he did know that Dragon Blood Evil Breaker was a high-quality art. Han Sen still wanted to conduct trades and collect more Geno arts, but after one fruit meal, Li Qiu was no longer interested. Han Sen still didn't have time to learn Dragon Blood Evil Breaker, and he repeatedly ransacked his brain for ideas on how to escape the fortress. Although he was trying to plan a jailbreak, he had become quite close to the small crocodile god. Now, the little crocodile god was dependent on Han Sen for survival. It had become totally addicted to Han Sen's wine. Li Qiu stared at Han Senator. She looked at Han Sen and the little crocodile god, who were currently lying on sunbathing chairs. While they soaked in the rays, Li Qiu had to pour them their wine. They had all been captured, and yet, she was being forced to serve Han Senator. That made her very angry. Goon! Li Qiu stared angrily at Han Sen. Hey, little crocodile god, do you want to go and see the outside world? The outside world is better than this place. There are many pretty girls and a whole lot more wine. You might be able to find a pretty lady crocodile god with nice, smooth skin. With your strength, small crocodile god, the ladies would be crying to get you. You will become so famous in the outside world, Han Sen coaxed, trying to convince the little crocodile god to leave the fortress. Han Sen's Dongxian Sutra wasn't as good at reading other creatures as the very high sense, but after he had been there for a while, he was still able to understand the behavior of the little crocodile god. In that way, they could actually hold conversations. Under Han Sen's influence, the little crocodile god was slowly becoming curious about the outside world. If the little creature had been alone, Han Sen would already have taken him off-world. But the creature was too small, and the big crocodile god wouldn't let it leave. So, there was nothing Han Sen could do. However, Han Sen had noticed a window of opportunity. The big crocodile god had to exit the fortress every few days, perhaps to find food. During that time, the little crocodile god was tasked with watching over the prisoners. If they made a single move to escape or cause trouble, the little crocodile god could call on the big crocodile god to hurry back. Exquisite and Li Qiu had tried to escape many times, but they were always brought back. Han Sen didn't try to run. He just encouraged the small crocodile god to leave. If he was successful in convincing it, escape would be trivial. The small crocodile god, constantly hearing Han Sen describe the outside world, became enthralled by the idea. But it didn't know how far away the world that Han Sen described truly was. He was talking about outside of the core area. He was talking about the Geno universe. It was somewhere core area creatures couldn't get to. Of course, the small crocodile god didn't understand the nature of the core area that he'd been born into. But now, he couldn't suppress his giddiness to leave. He was ready to get out of there. It had tried to run off before, but it hadn't gotten too far. This time, Han Sen was able to convince it to go all the way, and it excitedly rumbled at Han Sen to come along with it in a daring escape. Exquisite and Li Qiu were frozen, almost unable to believe Han Sen had been able to manipulate the creature like that. Lying to a child. How cheap. Li Qiu didn't think it was fair. Small crocodile god, bring those two along. Otherwise, there will be no one to serve you. Then, no one will be able to tell how powerful you are. Han Sen pointed at Li Qiu and Exquisite. That hadn't taken much effort. He thought he was doing them a favor. The small crocodile god made some grunting noises, then flew into the burning sea. Li Qiu and Exquisite were happy. Li Qiu had just been decrying Han Sen for tricking a child, but now she was very grateful. The small crocodile god's power wasn't as great as the power of the big crocodile god. Han Sen and the other two had to stick close to the small crocodile god. They needed the protection of its gravity substance chains to avoid being melted by the scary burning sea. It wasn't too long before the small crocodile, Han Sen, and the others were out of the cave. Han Sen and the small crocodile god scoped out the vicinity with care. They didn't see the big crocodile god nearby, and that made them feel relieved. Go. The pearly gates of this beautiful new world are opening for you. You will get wine, lady crocodiles, and the love and adoration of many different races. Han Sen saw the small crocodile god looking a little nervous. It was glancing back into the cave and seemed hesitant, so he tried to influence it a bit more. The small crocodile god rumbled happily. It jumped onto Han Sen's hand and swung its claws around. It looked very excited. He is just a child, and yet, He is so easy to trick. Pleased with himself, Han Sen flew up and escaped the planet. Exquisite and Li Qiu were quick to follow. With haste, the three of them and the small crocodile god left that planet of frightening gravity. They hadn't been away from the planet for very long when the bronze furnace joined them, whistling quietly and belching smoke. It had waited there patiently for Han Sen, which surprised him a lot. He thought it might have run off. The bronze furnace was making a lot of noise as it came toward them. The small crocodile god thought it was hostile at first. In response, the little creature swung one of its gravity substance chains and tied up the bronze furnace. The bronze furnace was stunned. It started to cry, believing it was going to be crushed by an immense force of gravity. "Stop, he's one of us. He's one of our people," Han Sen hastily explained to the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god let go of the bronze furnace. Due to the fact that the small crocodile god was still lying on Han Sen's head, the bronze furnace couldn't leave and neither could it stay. It didn't know what it was supposed to do. "Let's go. We should leave this area now." Han Sen didn't know where the big crocodile god had wandered off to. Since he didn't know how far away it was, they needed to keep going as far as they could to avoid having any nasty encounters with the beast. Their flight was surprisingly smooth, and the big crocodile god didn't show up. They brought the small crocodile god with them as they teleported a few systems away. Exquisite and Li Qiu used galaxy teleportation. They lost track of how many systems they traveled through, but they were fortunate enough to not encounter the big crocodile god for the length of their journey. "We are free." Li Qiu couldn't believe their escape had come about so easily. The small crocodile god had a lot of potential, but for the time being, it was only a primitive deified. It couldn't trap them as easily as the big crocodile god could. Li Qiu and Exquisite could teleport away whenever they wanted to. The small crocodile god looked at Han Sen and made an inquisitive noise. Its eyes scanned the area around, indicating what it meant to say was, "Where is the wine? Where are the people? Don't be hasty. We have just made it out. We still have a long way to go." Han Sen needed to calm the small crocodile god, and as he was thinking of a way to get rid of it, his heart jumped. Exquisite and Li Qiu also froze. They could feel something awful coming toward them. The blood drained from their faces. Is the big crocodile god coming? As Han Sen suppressed the tension in his stomach, he figured out which direction the frightening power was coming from. A scary xenogeniac was headed their way. What kind of xenogeniac is that? Han Sen stared at the creature. It wasn't the crocodile god. It was a big snake that looked something like a dragon. The snake was 100 meters long, and its head was like that of a cobra. But on its wing-like neck, there were 2 rows of eyes. Each row had 3 bright green eyes. The deified 6-core snake god? Exquisite and Li Qiu screamed. Judging from the way they were freaking out, that deified xenogeniac had to be something special. When Han Sen looked closer, he realized that the circles around the Snake King's neck weren't actually eyes. They were 6 spinning cogwheels. He didn't know what the 6 cogwheels did, though. "Quickly, we must go." Li Qiu shouted at Han Senator. She was on the verge of using God's Wander to escape that place. But before she could teleport away, she saw that the space around her had already been turned on its head. The entire universe appeared to be spinning like a hungry vortex. Han Sen also tried to teleport away, but he found that he couldn't tear space and escape through it like he would need to. It was like he had lost his connection to the outside world. "Oh no, we're trapped in 6 space. In this 6 space, all of space follows the rules set by the 6-core god snake. Your space powers won't be of any use here." Li Qiu was in shock. Han Sen wasn't frightened by this enemy, though. He noticed that the 6-core god snake was looking steadily at his head. Clearly, it was after the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god was very young, and it didn't yet know what fear meant. Seeing the 6-core god snake look at it, the little creature simply stared back. It then roared proudly at the 6-core god snake. Han Sen knew the small crocodile god commanding the snake to follow and be its little brother. The 6-core god snake appeared to understand, and it screamed back with immense rage. It opened its mouth and unleashed some space substance chains. They flew toward the small crocodile god like an aurora trailing through space. Han Sen quickly evaded them, and the small crocodile god flew forward. In all its boisterous glory, it fancied taking on the six-core god snake all by itself. It wanted to teach the huge creature a lesson. It made this decision because of Han Sen's constant compliments, no doubt. Han Sen had been going on and on about how powerful and almighty the small crocodile god was. He had filled the creature's head with nonsense, as if it was the strongest creature in existence. He had even claimed that every race would treat it like a god. He said people would admire and show great love to the little crocodile. He said every creature would want to become its subordinate. The poor, naive little crocodile god thought its mother was the most people being in the universe, and that it was number 2. It thought all other creatures were tiny by comparison, so it wasn't going to stand for the six-core god snake's offense. Han Sen hadn't run far before coming to a stop. He wanted to watch the fight between the snake and crocodile. Run. The small crocodile god isn't a worthy opponent for the six-core god snake. We should leave now before it is too late, Exquisite said, flying over to Han Sen. The small crocodile god's power should be as good as a primitive deified here, right? Can anything else in the core area be stronger than it? Han Sen asked. The six-core god snake is one of the strongest xenogeneics in the core area, Li Qier explained. The snake isn't as strong as the big crocodile god, but it is as good as a primitive can get. Plus, its space powers are so strong, and in addition to the fighting experience it has compared to the little crocodile god, well, the newborn crocodile god doesn't really stand a chance of fighting back. Pang! What Li Qier said immediately came true. There was a loud noise, and when Han Sen turned to take a look, he saw that the little crocodile god had been sent flying away by the six-core god snake. The little creature rolled end over end through space. It eventually hit a planet, and the planet blew up. So strong! Han Sen thought in shock. He took the bronze furnace with him as he flew away. The space around them was under the snake's control, so they couldn't teleport away. Even Exquisite and Li Qier were forced to fly away instead of teleporting. The space behind them seemed to groan with a strange sound. Han Sen couldn't help but look back. There, he saw that the small crocodile god's face was swollen and discolored. It started to cry. Its small eyes were streaming with tears. I'm sorry, little crocodile god. You can't beat him, and neither can I. At least you are a deified xenogeneic. You should just run while you still have the chance to. Don't take it out on me. We aren't being cruel here. You took us as hostages, remember? We are enemies, Han Sen said over his shoulder as he flew. Han Sen followed the very high women as they flew away, but some unexpected pangs of regret were striking Han Sen's heart. He thought that the teary eyes of the small crocodile god were meant for him. So, why did the six-core god snake want to kill the small crocodile god? Han Sen asked Li Qier as he continued flying. The six-core god snake is one of the rare core xenogeneics that can evolve. Its name wasn't always six-core god snake. It used to be known as the two-core god snake. Its neck only had 2 cogwheels back then. Whenever it eats a deified core gene, it can create another cogwheel, and its power increases. It now has 6 cores, and so the power it has should make it the most powerful primitive deified out there. Plus, it has scary space powers. It isn't like the Gold Armor General or those other core deified xenogeneics, Li Qier explained. Does the six-core god snake have a weakness? Han Sen asked with a frown. It does. Its power is very strong, but core xenogeneics always have flaws. The same applies to the six-core god snake. Its weakness is those cogwheels. 4 of them were obtained by eating 4 other deified xenogeneics. They aren't as good as the creature's original cogwheels. That is its weakness, Li Qier said. You guys should go on ahead, Han Sen said. Then, he suddenly flew back. What are you doing? Li Qier and Exquisite asked in confusion. They weren't quite sure what Han Sen was planning. You guys should leave now. I'm going back to watch, Han Sen said. He felt something weird in his heart, and so he decided to go back. Is he going to save that small crocodile god? Li Qier watched Han Sen leave. She couldn't believe that what she said was actually happening. He is controlled by his emotions way too much. He will be at a constant disadvantage like that. While his talents are exceptional, he is too dangerous to take on as a silkworm, Exquisite said emotionlessly. But if I was trapped and couldn't fight back, I wish there was someone out there driven by an emotion that made them want to save me, Li Qiu said with a conflicted expression. Everything must die. With an attitude like that, your practice with the very high sense will not go very far. Exquisite frowned. The small crocodile god had been captured by space substance chains. It hung in space, unable to move. Thankfully, its body was too strong for the chains to dig into its scaled flesh. The space substance kept hitting it, but the blows could only make the small creature bleed. The six-core god snake was staring down at the small crocodile god like a hungry demon. Its substance chains kept raging, lashing the little creature over and over. The small crocodile god continued to cry out as more and more bloody wounds appeared across its body. The small crocodile god's powers weren't enough to break the space substance chains. It was unable to avoid the hits. It was just hanging where it was, being lashed over and over. Streaks of blood ran down its body. Although it wasn't heavily injured, it was in agony. Its tears streamed off its face to fall like droplets of rain. If it wasn't for the small crocodile god's body having a high mass that made it tougher than the average deified xenogeneic, it would have been ripped to shreds by the six-core god snake. It was a shame the small crocodile god was so young. Its body wasn't strong enough to completely repel the damage done to it by the six-core god snake's space powers. More and more wounds appeared on its body as time went by. The small crocodile god was so scared that it looked like the creature was about to wet itself. The six-core god snake kept using its space substance chains to lash the small crocodile god's body. It eventually got tired of doing this, and so it just opened its mouth. Its scary fangs came bearing down on the small crocodile god. The small crocodile god's small eyes widened in terror. Tears fell as it desperately tried to wiggle its way out of the snake's grasp. But under the restrictions imposed by the substance chains, the little creature had no hope of running. The six-core god snake's fangs were going to slice into him. Pang! Suddenly, a cold metal light appeared, slamming into one of the six-core god snake's green cogwheels. The six-core snake god screamed in agony. The small crocodile god saw a giant metal pillar thrust its way through the eye-like cogwheel. Han Sen was behind that metal pillar, and he punched the back of the metal pillar continuously to drive it in deeper. The small crocodile god was as happy as it was shocked. The six-core god snake shuddered with every blow. It was in pain. The space substance chains that had bound the small crocodile god loosened. The small crocodile god's black light shone, and it managed to escape from the grip of the substance chains. Han Sen continued to pummel the back end of the sky god pillar. He had stolen that deified treasure from the extreme king. He couldn't use all his power, but his attacks so far seemed to be effective. He shoved the pillar into the cogwheel until the cogwheel cracked. With the sky god pillar lodged inside, the cogwheel could no longer spin. It was a shame that Han Sen wasn't deified. Otherwise, with his deified power combined with the sky god pillar, his blows could simply shatter the six-core god snake's cogwheels. The six-core god snake lowered its head and caught sight of Han Sen. It roared with rage. Its body unleashed several substance chains that looked like snakes. They flew straight for Han Sen. Each space substance chain seemed to tear the fabric of space as it came. It was like a space-cutting skill. If Han Sen's body was unable to withstand one of those space cuts, he would be ripped apart by the power of the chains. Han Sen didn't plan on trying to avoid the lashing, though. His body shone with gold light, and a collection of gold, robotic plates of armor formed around him. He turned into the gold robot general. The space substance chains came against the gold robot armor, slicing into the surface of the metal armor. It was like many invisible knives were trying to drive through the armor. Sparks erupted across the surface of the gold armor like fireworks. Because Han Sen's gold armor was so hard, the space substance chains were unable to completely cut through it. Han Sen shoved the gold general's speed to the max, and streamers of golden energy spewed out of the armor's metal pipes. It was like a pair of golden wings were spreading from the armor on Han Sen's back. The gold general drew back an arm as far as it would go, then threw a punch forward like a volcano erupting. The punch landed on the back of the sky god pillar. The Sky God Pillar was driven forward by the impact of the Golden General's fist. A loud cracking sound came from the six-core God Snake's cogwheel. The cogwheel was completely shattered by the Sky God Pillar, and the pillar pierced through the six-core God Snake's neck. The six-core God Snake shrieked in pain and swung its tail against Han Sen. Han Sen saw the tail coming, but he couldn't avoid it. The tail seemed to cast shadows all through space. He couldn't see it clearly, and it crashed against his Gold General armor. The Gold General was hit, and Han Sen was sent flying away like a star. He slammed into a giant planet, and the power of his fall poisoned the planet with radiation. A shockwave covered half the planet. Mountains fell, and the ground was lifted. The rocks rolled like waves. Half of the planet suddenly looked like the end of the world. The six-core God Snake didn't stop there. It hurtled forward, straight for the planet where its enemy had landed. Countless space substance chains coiled around the snake as it headed for the Gold General who was down on the planet. Small crocodile god, what are you waiting for? Gravity area? Han Sen shouted. The small crocodile god was still frozen, but hearing Han Sen's voice shook him out of his shock. He cast his gravity substance chains, generating a black shield that covered the six-core God Snake. Under the influence of that power, the snake accelerated like an asteroid as it fell to the planet's surface. Still in the gold armor, Han Sen stood up. He stomped on the ground and used his gold energy. The gold energy started to run out of the pipes in a stream, then a river. It was like a thruster pack that lifted the Gold General into the sky. It was headed for the falling six-core God Snake. Han Sen guided the Gold General, using it to gather up power inside his fist. A powerful gold godlight manifested across it. Han Sen's fist flashed forward, battering the Sky God Pillar that was still attached to the six-core God Snake's neck. The Sky God Pillar punched straight through the body of the six-core God Snake. Even the Gold General itself ended up ripping through the snake's body. The Gold General slowed to a stop. Still holding onto the giant Sky God Pillar, Han Sen turned and looked back at the six-core God Snake. The force of gravity was still making it fall toward the planet. Pang! The six-core God Snake hit the planet with a force that was scarier than Han Sen's descent. This was definitely not that planet's lucky day. It had taken 2 scary hits in a row, and now it looked completely destroyed. Nice job, small crocodile god. Keep applying gravity to that fiend. Han Sen shouted as he piloted the Gold General down to press the Sky God Pillar against the six-core God Snake. The six-core God Snake was severely limited by the incredible force weighing down on it. The creature's movements were incredibly slow, and it was completely unable to dodge the Gold General's attacks. The six-core God Snake shrieked strangely. Countless space substance chains opened like a chrysanthemum, then came for Han Senator. They stretched forward to hold him off, trying to keep him from directly approaching the six-core God Snake. Han Sen's face didn't change, and he didn't dodge. He pushed the power of the Gold General to the max as he headed for the six-core God Snake. As countless space substance chains tangled around the Gold General, Han Sen shouted. He used the Gold General to toss the Sky God Pillar in front of himself, and then there was a burst of gold energy. A punch that was prettier than the sun came forth to strike the back of the Sky God Pillar. The Sky God Pillar became a pillar of light. Every part of the pillar shone as it tore through the planet's atmosphere and slammed into another cogwheel. The six-core God Snake had been unable to run. The six-core God Snake was restrained by the small crocodile god's gravity substance chains, and so it couldn't even jerk to the side to avoid the strike. Another cogwheel core snapped in half under the force of the blow. The pillar pinned the beast to the planet as it screamed in pain. The space substance chains broke, shattering into 1,000,000 pieces as the snake thrashed. Han Sen used the Gold General to jump past the falling remnants of the substance chains. He was headed for the six-core God Snake that was pinned to the planet. The small crocodile god roared happily. With Han Sen controlling the six-core God Snake, the small crocodile god became cocky. The six-core God Snake had beat him up earlier, and so he gnashed his teeth now in rage. His body unleashed a black light, and even more heavy substance chains thudded into the six-core God Snake. The six-core God Snake's movements slowed to a crawl. There was no way that it could escape the planet now. 2 of its cogwheels were destroyed now, and it was heavily injured. It moved with snail-like speed. The small crocodile god's gravity substance chains were pinning it in place, keeping it from avoiding Han Sen's attacks. Pang, 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 pang. The gold general flew over to the 6-core god snake that was pinned to the planet. Instead of pulling out the pillar that was pinning the snake, he used his fists to strike the creature. Gold energy carried each swing. It was like a glowing storm was raining down on the captured snake. The 6-core god snake remained pinned in place. The small crocodile god's substance chains had it trapped, and there was nothing it could do to defend itself. Under the gold general's continuing barrage of attacks, the cogwheels broke one after another. In seconds, another 2 had crumbled to dust. As this went on, the 6-core god snake was suffering horrendously. It cast countless space substance chains. They rose like an infinity of venomous snakes and tried to wrap themselves around the gold general. Han Sen was running his gold general at max capacity. Still, he couldn't free his fist from the substance chains. He was trapped and could no longer move. Pang! The 6-core god snake's tail slammed into him, sending the gold general flying again. Its anger fueled that scary attack, caving in the gold general's chest. The 6-core god snake is so powerful. It is gravely injured, and yet it can still fight. No wonder it is considered one of the best in the core area. The gold general tore a trench across a long section of the planet's surface before Han Sen could regain control of the machine. The 6-core god snake's tail coiled around the sky god pillar and pulled the pillar out of its body. It wanted to move, but the small crocodile god appeared in front of it. The little creature struck one of the 2 cogwheels the snake had remaining. There was a snapping noise. The small crocodile god managed to destroy the cogwheel, and it was a painful blow for the 6-core god snake. The agony made the snake's long body shiver and shake, and it tried to swing its tail toward the small crocodile god instead. Pang! The small crocodile god flew away like a ball, and the sky god pillar drifted away as well. Han Sen drove the gold general to reclaim the sky god pillar. With his weapon in hand, he thrust his arm toward the 6-core god snake. While the snake was still contorted in pain, Han Sen penetrated the creature's final cogwheel. The 6-core god snake thrashed and twisted. It tried using its tail to smack the gold general away again, but the small crocodile god was furiously returning to the fray. A heavy substance chain landed across the snake and slowed it even further. The gold general approached as this occurred. Han Sen's fists angrily pummeled the wounds of the 6-core god snake. A frenzy of gold punches hit the snake like a crazy and wrathful storm. The 6-core god snake's body was slowly driven into the planet. Chunks of rock flew everywhere. Pang! Han Sen continued to punch, and the 6-core god snake and the planet exploded. The scary explosion spread through space like a beautiful firework. Core deified xenogeneic hunted. 6-core god snake. Deified xenogeneic gene found. Obtained 6-core god snake beast soul. I got the beast soul.
Han Sen grinned.
Far away in space, Exquisite and Likir were frozen. They had used their very high sense to watch the entire battle unfold. They thought Han Sen was quite amazing when he turned into the gold general, but then he cooperated with the small crocodile god to defeat the 6-core god snake with relative ease. It really was Dollar that stole the sea sky eye and the sky god pillar. Likir's heart was a confused mess of emotion at that moment. She had thought from the beginning that the gold armor general had some connection to Dollar, but she hadn't suspected that Dollar himself could have been that gold general. What is that? Exquisite's normally emotionless face looked shocked. She recognized the gold general, but she didn't understand how Dollar was able to become the foe he had once defeated. I do not know. Likir shook her head with a wry smile. She knew that was the gold general, but she didn't know how Dollar could transform into it. She could not imagine what forces could allow that. The small crocodile god ran to the 6-core god snake's corpse. It kicked and bit it savagely. It was a shame that the little creature didn't eat meat. And the 6-core god snake's body was like metal, anyway. There was probably nothing worth eating there regardless. Han Sen put away the gold general that had been badly damaged. The 6-core god snake was strong. Even the Gold General's powerful defensives had taken a lot of nasty damage. Some parts of it were broken entirely. If the small crocodile god hadn't used his gravity substance chains to restrict the snake, the Gold General would have been cut to pieces. Digging out the 6-core god snake's core xenogeneic gene, Han Sen noted how it was a jade-green cogwheel. It was only around the size of a fist, and it had spun continuously in the 6-core god snake's head. That is some good stuff. Han Sen could feel the scary presence emitted by the cogwheel, and so he complimented it. But he still couldn't absorb deified genes just yet, so he put it away for now. The small crocodile god spent the last of his anger on the corpse of the snake. He flew to Han Sen and began to make noises that were a mixture of screams and crying. It was like the little guy claiming that Han Sen had lied to him. Small crocodile god, you are so powerful. You killed such a powerful xenogeneic. You must be the strongest creature in the universe. Han Sen looked at the small crocodile god with admiration and complimented it profusely. The small crocodile god was about to continue ranting at Han Sen, but as he heard all this, he became cocky. He squinted his little eyes and looked very proud. He looked as if he was strong and almighty and forgot about his argument with Han Sen. Kids are easy to trick, Han Sen thought, looking at the prideful little crocodile god with a smile. The small crocodile god leaped back onto Han Sen's head. It raised its head and roared. It seemed to be telling Han Sen to go and find more xenogeneics for it to kill. Han Sen flew away, and as he went, he examined the core deified beast soul he had obtained from the 6-core god snake. Core deified beast soul 6-core god snake. Weapon. A weapon beast soul? It's a weapon beast soul. It is finally here. I wonder what it will be? Since it came from a snake, perhaps it will be a spear. Maybe it will be a sword. Or maybe it will end up being a dagger. Han Sen was so happy. He had wanted a deified weapon for the longest time. And this was a space power weapon beast soul, so it had to be something special. Without hesitation, Han Sen summoned the 6-core god snake beast soul. A green compound bow appeared in his hands. The bow looked so cool. It had mechanical arms, and its body was decorated with 6 wheels. It had the features of a mechanical cold-based weapon. It was chilly to the touch, and it looked frightening. He could already tell that it would have unparalleled accuracy. The cold-based weapon exuded a murderous feeling. Something about its styling reminded Han Sen of a complex machine. Han Sen could see the bow shimmer with the shadow of the 6-core god snake. This is a bow? Han Sen looked at the 6-core snake bow in his hands in surprise. Han Sen immediately loved his new bow. He had recently used Autumn Wind's wind string, but the bow already possessed an owner. Forcing it open hadn't felt good. But this 6-core snake bow was different. Han Sen held its body and pulled the string effortlessly. The cogwheels across it spun as he drew the string back, and it didn't cost him any strength to make use of it. And the power the bow could unleash was just as great as he had hoped. In fact, this bow was capable of shooting projectiles with more power than Windstring could have managed. Han Sen could feel the space power coming from the bow, but he didn't know how that space power would affect the use of the 6-core snake bow. This was the first time Han Sen had gotten the opportunity to make use of a deified beast soul weapon. It was difficult to gauge the amount of power it possessed. Han Sen didn't plan on trying it out immediately. He was willing to save this bow for his true identity as Han Senator for $. The Gold General already provided enough power to battle deified beings. Plus, it wouldn't even be possible for Han Sen to use the bow while he was using the Gold General. Therefore, keeping the bow as $. Would be pointless. However, the weapon couldn't be more perfect for Han Sen's identity. The Peacock King's soul robe wouldn't affect his use of the bow, and it would actually give the bow even more power. It would definitely give him more security. Even if deifieds came for him, with the Peacock King's soul robe and the 6-core snake bow, they wouldn't be able to kill Han Sen. If those extreme king guys dare to come after me again, I will feed them arrows. I'll let them know I have feelings, too. Han Sen put the 6-core snake bow away. He would use it later. He had used the Dongshin area to hide himself and the small crocodile god while he looked over the bow. Not even Exquisite and Li Kier could see what he was doing now. The 6-core snake bow wouldn't be noticed. All that I'm missing now are deified arrows. Having a bow without arrows isn't perfect, Han Sen thought greedily. Exquisite and Likier were going to chase after Han Sen, but they soon realized he had vanished from their abilities of detection. They could no longer detect his presence, no matter what method they used. They ran to the place where Han Sen was last seen, but he seemed to be long gone. Not even the very high sense could find a trace of him. This dollar is a very mysterious individual, Exquisite said with a frown. Not just mysterious. Everything he does is a little beyond belief, but it will be hard to convince someone like that to become my silkworm. Likier sighed. No matter how strong he is, he cannot elude the very high forever. If you really want to pick him, we can go back home and have the Elder unearth his identity. Then, we can formulate a plan to take him, Exquisite said. Likier shook her head. He will be my silkworm. It is best if I try to bring him in myself. Exquisite said nothing, but she didn't have much hope for Likier's efforts. Before she met Dollar, Exquisite would never have expected that a potential silkworm might refuse an offer from the very high. But Han Sen was so amazing that she was even double-guessing the prestige of her race. It would be very difficult to convince someone like that to become a silkworm. Plus, Likier's very high sense wasn't perfect yet. But Likier insisted, so Exquisite saw no reason to argue. Han Sen brought the small crocodile god around with him to hunt. They killed a few core kings and Aeginex. The small crocodile god was happy at first, but now he was growing tired. Han Sen brought out some wine to make the creature happy again, but the small crocodile god was becoming harder to please. He wanted to see the outside world more and more. The place I told you about exists, but you can't see it in the core area. You are a creature of the core area. You cannot leave. So, how can I take you to see what is out there? Han Sen was annoyed by this prospect, too. Fortunately, the bronze furnace was there. It was able to help Han Sen by making the small crocodile god much happier. The small crocodile god had killed many Xenogeneix for the bronze furnace, and now, there were many swords inside the furnace. Han Sen used glasses to examine the furnace. Its potential was 5 stars, too. That was the max a king class could be before becoming deified. What a shame. The Xenogeneix from the core area cannot leave. If they could, I could keep them by my side at all times.
Han Sen sighed.
Han Sen had the bronze furnace lead them around. Han Sen soon left the core area, though, and he returned to the White Whale. In the past, whenever Han Sen returned, the pirates would happily welcome him. But this time, no one even noticed when he appeared. Everyone was watching something outside of the White Whale, and they seemed to be frozen with shock. Even Bauer was. Han Sen didn't know what was going on. He followed everyone's gazes and found that there was a group of snakes coming to the land. They were emerging from the Black Sea, and the White Tiger was trying to fight them off. These battles had happened many times before, but this time, it was different. There were too many groups of snakes coming out of the Black Sea. There were many times the number of snakes that had appeared on any previous occasion. The snakes slithered onto the island in hordes and began munching on the mushrooms. They were scarier than a swarm of locusts. The White Tiger was killing them, but there were too many snakes. It was unable to kill them all. The snakes slithered onto the island in greater and greater numbers. Oh no! Fong Qingyu suddenly breathed upon seeing the snake hordes. Oh no, what? The pirates looked at Fong Qingyu. Fong Qingyu looked terrible and he said, if the White Tiger cannot stop the snakes, all the mushrooms here will be eaten by the creatures. That means we will have no food for ourselves. Pa, I thought you meant something more severe. That is no big deal. We can trade for food in the core area with others, a pirate said. It's not that simple. Listen, if all the mushrooms are gone, then the White Tiger might get hungry and come after us. And how about the snakes themselves? Aside from the mushrooms out there? Before Fong Qingyu finished, everyone knew what he meant. They all looked at the mushrooms on each other's heads. They felt a chill. If the snakes treated them like food, they would have to stop the snakes' advance. And that probably wouldn't go too well for them. They had seen how scary the snakes were, as many of them could be king class. But the snakes also came in seemingly infinite numbers. It would be impossible to kill them all. If the White Tiger couldn't stop the snakes, there was little they could do. Little Red Bird, go out and help, Han Sen said to the little red bird. If the snake group took over the island, it would be quite the annoyance for them. That was why Han Sen allowed the little red bird to help the white tiger fight off the snakes. But before the little red bird did anything, a harsh wind blew across the Black Sea. It created giant, tumultuous waves as a giant monster emerged from the black water,